Just a little more than a week since the superstorm Sandy devastated the Northeast. Now a new powerful nor'easter is already packing a wintry punch of wind, rain, and snow. CNN meteorologist Rob Marciano is joining us from Staten Island in New York right now. What's going on, Rob?
Wolf, it's snowing. Can you believe this? Big flakes. Been snowing like this now for a good 2-3 hours, and the winds have been gusty as well. We've had wind gusts over Cape Cod or near Cape Cod over 76 miles an hour, and several inches of snow piling up in the storm zone. We're in Staten Island. Just a few hundred yards that way is the ocean. We made it through the first high tide with no flooding, but over a week ago the flooding was up and over my shoulders, and this area has been decimated. Snow, we've got a couple of inches on the ground. Wolf, you know it's snowing hard this time of year if the snow is actually sticking. So that's how hard it's coming down, but it's piling up on some of the debris that's been pulled out of these houses that saw substantial flood damage from Hurricane Sandy just over a week ago. This home is lit up only because we let them plug into our satellite truck generator. These people are dealing with some serious cold, some serious wind, and still over a week after Sandy ripped through this area, Wolf.
How are the folks out there preparing for this?
Well, they prepared as well as they could. You know, they've got shelters open, but I tell you what, come on inside. A lot of people sadly are staying where they are because they had some looting a couple of right after the storm, so they don't want their stuff to get stolen. Like I said, they plugged into our satellite truck inside here. The Camaradas have ripped everything out to kind of dry the place out. Earlier we spoke with Nick, and here's how he explained his emotional story to our viewers.
Everything that I own is here, and I'm trying to save it. My wife, my kids, my best friend Mike, and I'm just going to lose everything. I mean, my body's shutting down. There's no words to explain or express the stress, the pain, the suffering.
Physically and emotionally worn out, Wolf, no doubt about that. They're the Camaradas. Hey, Nick, how's the carbon monoxide meters working all right? So far, so good. We're hoping. They got Wolf. They got the propane heater going. Obviously, those can be dangerous things, so they're wary of that. But just to get the temperature above freezing is the goal, so he and his family can sleep in some somewhat warm shelter tonight. Wolf.
What a sad story, Rob. Thanks very, very much. And happening now, President Obama is returning to the White House to face the hard part of winning re-election, a fiscal disaster that could be just around the corner. Also, Republicans are picking up the pieces after Mitt Romney's loss, more worried than ever about reaching beyond their white political base and the huge lines and problems at polling places across America. Can the president deliver on this promise?
By the way, we have to fix that.
I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room. Right now, President Obama and his family, they're heading back to the White House. They'll be calling that home for another 4 years. The American people handing him a clear victory and presenting him with enormous challenges in the immediate weeks and months ahead. The president wound up winning every critical battleground state except for Florida, which is still too close to call. He still might win Florida, but even without Florida, he still has 303 electoral votes right now. That's well over the 270 needed to win, and far more than Mitt Romney with 206 electoral votes. The president also won the popular vote with 50% of the vote compared to 48% for Mitt Romney. The Obama camp had plenty to celebrate last night in Chicago, but today the president has a big second-term to-do list. Let's turn to our White House correspondent, Brianna Keilar. She's watching this part of the story for us. Brianna?
Wolf, he started to tackle his to-do list even before leaving Chicago. He called congressional leaders, both Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate, to touch base before beginning negotiations over the fiscal cliff. He also stopped by his campaign headquarters. It was an emotional thank you received by a lot of staff and volunteers there, some who have worked toward President Obama's cause for as many as 18 months. But he has a lot on his plate as he heads back here to Washington as we wait for him to touch down at Andrews Air Force Base. December 31st, that is when the tax cuts expire, part of the fiscal cliff. January 2nd, that's when the spending cuts kick in. And that's not all. You move towards inauguration January 20th, and at the beginning of February, President Obama's budget proposal will go to Congress. Also in February, the Treasury Department estimates that the debt ceiling will need to be increased. And yes, it was negotiations over the debt ceiling last year that nearly brought the country to the brink of default. And then come March, that is when government funding for the federal government is expected to expire. That could potentially lead to a government shutdown. So you can see there's a whole lot on President Obama's plate as he heads back here to Washington and also, quite frankly, Wolf, to reality.
Reality indeed, political reality. I take it there's been a change to the arrival back at the White House. What's going on?
That's right. It seemed like there would be a somewhat dramatic arrival for President Obama. He was initially expected, as he normally does, to come by chopper, by Marine One to the south lawn of the White House and walk the 100 or 150 yards into the White House. That's normally an open press situation where people can gather. There's room for a lot of people, including press, to gather and greet him. That's not going to happen. So there were a lot of staff members who are going to come out and greet him, no doubt with clapping and with cheers as he walked into the White House. Because of weather, he's now motorcading, and that means that he pulls up much closer to the White House and just goes in. It's not quite as much of a grand arrival, and this has been limited now so that fewer members of the press, including myself and a number of other correspondents and also White House staff members, will not be there to see him as he comes in, Wolf.
So we'll get a still photo at least out of that. All right, Brianna. Thanks very much. As for Republicans, they're doing a lot of rethinking right now after Mitt Romney's defeat, and Kate Baldwin is picking up this part of the story.
Absolutely, Wolf. When Mitt Romney told reporters he thought he would win, it apparently was not just spin. A former Romney advisor tells CNN that members of the campaign went into Election Day thinking they would defeat the president. The advisor says Romney wound up losing because of the Democrats' strong turnout. There's no word on Governor Romney's future plans. We are told, though, he's likely to spend the next several days getting some rest and spending time with his family. Some much-deserved rest after a very long campaign.
Yes, a little rest is good. We heard quite a few Republicans insist that Romney would win right up until he lost. And some of them trashed state and national polls that showed President Obama had the advantage. Listen to this.
They're overpolling Democrats overwhelmingly. These polls are basically just part and parcel of the campaign for Barack Obama to help him stay in this game as long as possible.
We're going to win by a landslide. I base it on reading the polls, the exact same polls that say that Obama's going to win.
That poll has a Democratic oversample of 7 percentage points. In 2008, the Democrats turned out 2 percentage points more in New Hampshire. That poll is so far out of whack, I'm not worried about it one bit.
The NBC Wall Street Journal poll in Ohio had a 9-point advantage in Democrats in the poll. That's bigger than it was in 08, and I've yet to find anybody who thinks that, that 12 is going to be a more Democratic year than 08.
Fact of the matter is that serious pollsters got it right all along. Republican surrogates, they got it wrong. Apparently, most of the time. Let's talk about this with our senior political analyst, Ron Brownstein, the editorial director of the National Journal. The CNN ORC poll, all the mainstream polls, they were pretty much perfect in their targets all along. Nate Silver, the New York Times, he got it all right. What happened to these Republican pollsters, these Republican political operatives, if you will, who insisted that these polls which showed the president doing well were all biased and wrong?
It was an extreme example of a tendency that exists on both the left and the right, but especially on the right. In the modern conservative movement, there's a tendency to create this kind of hermetically sealed alternate reality, that ranges from Real Clear Politics to Fox News, in which anything that kind of contravenes the idea that there is an inherent conservative majority in the country is fundamentally and immediately rejected. In fact, the polls did get it right. In August, I wrote that for Barack Obama The formula for victory was 80-40, 80% of minorities and 40% of whites, so long as minorities were at least 26% of the vote, as they were last time. If the polls were wrong about anything, Wolf, it was under projecting the minority share of the vote, which actually rose to 28%. Very few pollsters had that, and if anything, the electorate tilted even further toward the Democrats in many places than we saw expected in those polls. So, look, this was an example. You know, Daniel Patrick Moynihan famously said, as you recall, everybody's entitled to their own opinions. They're not entitled to their own facts. Too many analysts on the right believe they are entitled to their own facts, particularly when it comes to these electoral, kind of matters. And this was, I think, a wake-up call about you're polling. How many people were polled in October? The idea that it would be systematically wrong in both the state and the national level kind of beggars the imagination.
Yeah, they were even going so far as predicting landslide for Mitt Romney, which was counter to all the mainstream polls out there. It was pretty shocking when you take a look at it. We'll have to do a complete review, and I'm sure political scientists will be doing a lot of that. And now you've looked closely at the polls, and you're an expert on these subjects. You talk about the Rust Belt, the Sun Belt. What do you see here as far as the election yesterday is concerned?
Here's what's really striking. The overall picture, of course, is that Barack Obama wins re-election comfortably despite losing white voters by 20 points. In fact, Mitt Romney runs as well among whites as any Republican challenger ever, matching Bush in 1988 and only 1 point behind Eisenhower in 52, and yet loses. And in part that is true because Barack Obama was able to navigate not one tightrope but two. He built very different coalitions in the Sun Belt and in the Rust Belt. In the Sun Belt states like Virginia and Florida, then Colorado and Nevada in the West, he faced enormous difficulties among those working-class white voters, but he overcame it by running reasonably well among college-educated whites and benefiting from that big minority turnout. We saw a big increase in the minority share of the vote in places like Florida and Nevada, up 5 points in a single election cycle, which is remarkable. Now, in the Rust Belt, he put together a very different coalition. There is not enough of that coalition of the ascendant, as I've called it, to win. You've got to kind of mobilize blue-collar voters, and there he was able to win just enough working-class whites. If you look, for example, at the numbers among non-college white women, much better in the Rust Belt than the Sun Belt. He put that together with some of the college-educated white women and a smaller but growing minority population to hold on to those critical Midwestern battlegrounds of Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio.
Fascinating stuff. Ron Braunstein, as usual, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you, Wolf.
Kate, he knows his stuff. He knows this stuff well. And it is pretty shocking, the accusations that were made against the mainstream pollsters. These are professional statisticians. They do their job well. If it's just one poll, that can be an outlier.
Right,
when you have so many of them saying basically the same thing, to say they're skewed, they're interviewing too many Democrats as opposed to Republicans, well, you know what? They were almost precise. I do
remember you when we were talking about this in the thick of it. You're saying just wait and see how the election turns out, and then we'll talk. Then we'll do our review. And I think you were absolutely right about that, because you said the mainstream pollsters would be right in the end. Still ahead, now that the election is over, President Obama is promising to reach out to Republicans. Well, how much are Democrats willing to compromise? We'll ask the party chair, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, coming up. And a landmark election for gay Americans who want to marry or serve in the U.S. Senate.
The Democrats are certainly celebrating key victories in the election.
That's absolutely right. Of course, President Obama won another term, and the Democrats gained seats in the Senate, which they already controlled. But very good news for them there. But despite predictions to the contrary, the House remains firmly in Republican hands.
Let's talk about that and more with Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's the chair of the Democratic National Committee. First of all, congratulations on getting reelected.
Thank you.
Was it even close in your district over there?
At the end of the day, it was not close.
What did you get? How many percent?
65%.
Oh, that's not bad. You know, next time you should shoot for 70%.
Really appreciate it. I'm just happy to be reelected.
Right, well,
Took nothing for granted.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
When I interviewed Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader in the House, a little while ago on October 2nd, she was pretty confident that the 25 seats net gain might be possible for the Democrats to be the majority. She might be the speaker again. Listen to this exchange I had with her.
I think that we probably have to win more than 25 to net.
Can you net 25 seats?
Yes.
Oh, yes, she said. What happened?
Well, I mean, she said probably have to win more than 25, and that was because after redistricting, the redistricting process across the country put a lot of our members who were previously not in a vulnerable situation in one.
Because Republicans control the legislators on all of these states.
In many, they picked up a lot of legislative chambers in 2010, and as a result, they were able to redraw the district lines in a lot of states in their favor. And so we lost 17 seats last night, while gaining, I think we're up to 25 seats that we've picked up.
Our current projection has 233 Republicans in the new House, 194 Democrats. There's still a couple of seats
with races still to be called.
I know redistricting is one thing we've talked about a lot, but was it a problem with candidates? Was it a problem with funding? Because, I mean, there were predictions that Democrats had a strong chance to take back the House, and that clearly did not happen.
The DCCC, led by Steve Israel, they put a phenomenal field of candidates on the field. They really did. They had the resources they needed to win. At the end of the day, when you're up against a stacked deck in a district that is skewed towards Republicans, then it makes it harder. And then don't forget, in a House race, while a super PAC has trouble buying the White House, they have obviously trouble buying a Senate seat, and grassroots paid off there. It's much easier for all that super PAC money dumped into a House race to make a more significant difference. And I think that affected a lot of our House races because there was such a lopsided amount of outside money in there. And it's one of the things that absolutely has to be addressed. We have to get that opaque, non-transparent, corporate special interest money out of the democratic process. It's really one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever handed down.
The Supreme Court ruled it was constitutional. There's a limited what you could do.
What we can do as a Congress is come together and pass legislation like the Disclose Act that holds these corporations accountable, that has disclosure.
By the way, here's the President of the United States Air Force One landing in Andrews Air Force Base, or Joint Base Andrews, they call it now. He's coming back from Chicago with the First Lady, their daughters. It's an exciting time for him. You're beaming as you just think about it. You were with him last night.
I was, yes.
When did you have a chance to talk to him?
I did. I had a chance to talk to him and the First Lady and the Vice President and Mrs. Biden, and it was just really gratifying. I'm so proud, not just of the President and Vice President, but of the tens of thousands of our volunteers who really, as I said, knocked on doors till their knuckles bled. And, what was the most gratifying was that our team, our campaign, put together the largest, most dynamic grassroots presidential campaign in history. And, even though there was a ton of money that was dumped on the president, they dumped everything but the kitchen sink on this president. But we ran a campaign that the average contribution was $50. We ran a door-to-door, neighbor-to-neighbor, people-to-people campaign and increased our turnout when there was, for months, I know we had these discussions that there was some kind of enthusiasm gap. Not only was there not an enthusiasm gap, which we insisted there wasn't, we had increases in African-American turnout, in youth turnout, in Latino turnout from over 2008.
I know you worked hard to make sure that some of your Jewish constituents, and you have a lot in South Florida, whether in Miami-Dade.
President Obama got 70% of the Jewish vote.
What did he get 4 years earlier?
It was 74, but the adjustment arguably is, because of the economy, there was obviously in every demographic group a little bit of erosion.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated the president today when he met with the U.S. ambassador to Israel. I think we have a clip of that.
Oh, good.
I want to congratulate President Obama on his re-election. I think the United States of America again demonstrated why it's the greatest democracy on earth. The security relationship between the United States and Israel is rock solid, and I look forward to working with President Obama to further strengthen this relationship.
Was that a big issue among your constituents, the U.S.-Israeli relationship? Because, as you know, the Republicans and Romney, they tried to say that the president threw Israel under the bus. That was the argument. Romney made it at the convention, at the Republican convention.
I think that the reason the president ultimately got 70% of the Jewish vote was because on domestic issues, whether it's investing in education or health care, civil rights, civil liberties, women's health, that's the natural home for Jewish voters. And then we were able to make sure that the lies and distortions and mischaracterizations the Republicans tried to sow among Jewish voters were not able to take hold.
We're always out of time, but real quick, I have to ask you about the fiscal cliff. That's the issue that we're facing when I head back to Capitol Hill, and you do as well. Right. John Boehner today, in a speech, he had a conciliatory tone, and he also made the point to say that the American people expect us to find common ground, and we are willing to accept some additional revenue via tax reform. What's going to happen?
Well, I was glad to see an olive branch extended by the Speaker. We can't ignore that President Obama did have the kitchen sink thrown at him yesterday, but his accomplishments, health care reform, rescuing the auto industry, Wall Street reform, in spite of that kitchen sink, voters voted to move forward. And we need to recognize that that balanced approach the president talked about the whole campaign is what we need to work together towards.
You sound a little optimistic.
I am optimistic.
It's going to be a very busy lame duck session.
Let's see how long that optimism lasts.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Debbie
Glass is half full.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Still ahead right now, a nor'easter, if you can even believe it, is pounding the same areas devastated by Superstorm Sandy. We're getting new details ahead.
Dismal day on Wall Street today. Kate has that. Some of the other top stories. Pretty bad day.
Yeah, it was pretty rough as we were watching it all throughout the day. All three major indices were down sharply at the closing bell, each losing more than 2% of its value. CNN's Allison Cossack is at the New York Stock Exchange with details. Allison?
Hi, Kate. The Dow posted its biggest loss of the year today, tumbling 312 points. It wasn't the election, but comments from the president of the European Central Bank that sparked the selling. Mario Draghi said the German economy is slowing, a sign the debt crisis is getting worse overseas. The election results were also a concern as Wall Street turns its full attention to the biggest problem facing the U.S. economy, the fiscal cliff. And if nothing is done about it, many economists say we'll go back into a recession. As one analyst puts it, stocks will plummet and the economy will drown in quicksand. A dire forecast, but it's a huge problem. Kate?
Allison, thank you so much. Also, just about an hour ago, the Greek parliament approved a new round of austerity measures. But even ahead of the vote, tens of thousands of people protested, you're seeing video right there, outside the building against new cuts. Some demonstrators threw Molotov cocktails and police fired tear gas. The new cuts are required for Greece to get more international economic help. And if you can even believe it, a nor'easter is bringing new misery to some of the areas hardest hit a week ago by Superstorm Sandy. The new storm is packing snow, wind, and bone-chilling temperatures. A grim forecast for a region where more than 600,000 households are still without power from Sandy, and storm surges up to 4 feet are forecast along already battered coastlines. Insult to injury. Ugh.
Awful.
I know.
I feel so bad for these people.
I know.
Coming up, we have some winners, we have some losers, and we have lessons to be learned from the election. We're going to talk about that with our political panel and a closer look at voting problems, including those long lines that some people had to stand in for hours and hours to vote. Is this the United States of America? What is going on? Also, the President of the United States getting ready to get off Air Force One. He has just landed at Joint Base Andrews. It used to be called Andrews Air Force Base, right outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. The president and his family, they've just landed from Chicago, and they're going to be heading over to the White House. All right, there they are, the president, the first lady, Sasha Malia. They have just landed at Joint Base Andrews outside of Washington, D.C. They are going to get into a car and drive to the White House. Apparently the weather is precluding Marine One from taking a little helicopter ride from Andrews to the White House. Helicopter takes maybe 8 or 10 minutes, if that, but to drive takes a little bit longer. You're in a motorcade. You don't have to worry about streetlights. So that's it. So they're getting ready to leave. Now you're looking at live pictures over there. They're in the limo, and they're getting ready to drive to the White House. Let's talk about what's going on as we look at these pictures right now. We've all been poring over election results, the exit poll results to figure out exactly how President Obama won, why Mitt Romney lost. Let's discuss it with 3 of our expert analysts right now. Joining us, David Gergen, our senior political analyst, also our CNN contributors, Van Jones and Anna Navarro. Anna, look at this. Chris Christie, he was asked, he's always blunt, he said, how come Romney lost? He said he didn't get enough votes. So let's figure out let's figure out why. And I'll talk about the Latino vote, a subject you're familiar with. In Bush in 2004 got 44% of the Latino vote. McCain in 2008 got 31% of the Latino vote. Romney yesterday got 27% of the Latino vote, the fastest growing segment of our population. What did he do wrong?
I think he tried to establish his conservative bona fides that he did not have by going too far to the right on immigration and on issues important to Latinos during the primary, and he never quite recovered. I also think he started too late, the outreach to Latinos. It wasn't after the primary when we saw a real huge blitz and effort and resources being put in. Mitt Romney has been running for president for 6 years. This is something he should have been putting energy into and time into long before that.
Let me bring Van into this conversation. The president got 93% of the African-American vote, 71% of the Latino vote. Those make up about 23% of the total population. He only got, 39% of the white vote out there. He got 44% the last time. What was the issue here?
Well, you have two disturbing trends. On the one hand, you have the Republican Party that's kind of backed itself into a demographic cul-de-sac, where they're sort of wrapped around the white vote that's getting smaller. That's disturbing for the Republican Party because they need to be a party of everybody. But you also have another very disturbing trend, which is the Democratic Party is not being able to find ways to attract white folks. These are two unhealthy parties in that regard. And both parties need to look at this very seriously. Now, I do want to say, though, the fact that the African-American community came out 93%, actually bigger numbers and percentage-wise, than 2008, shows a determination on the part of this community to participate.
I thought in 2008 he got 96% of the African-American vote.
You may be right on that, but still, to rival that 2008 turnout, which was historic by any measure, shows a determination on the part of this community to participate. I'm so surprised to hear the Republican Party only saying they got to do better with Latinos. They're not saying they got to do better with African Americans when you see this incredible desire to be a part of the system. So there's something wrong with both parties. We got to look at that.
And David, as we're looking at pictures now of the first family heading out from Joint Base Andrews, heading back to the White House for the first time since the election wrapped up last night, I wanted to ask you, we hear this often when a president wins a second term, that he now has political capital. He's now free from having to worry about getting reelected. Kind of, you know, his hands are no longer tied. He can set his legacy now and he can get stuff done. Is there, historically, does that bear out, do you think?
That's wrong. Historically, most second terms have actually been weaker at home than first terms because you have power for a short while, and then it begins to drain away as you head toward the midterm elections in your second term, and then after the midterm elections, everyone's looking over your shoulder to the next person. And therefore, you inevitably, with rare exceptions, second terms are weaker. What the presidents do in the second term is they spend a lot more time in foreign policy because that's where they continue to have authority. Now, we'll have to see. I think this is one of the big tests for this president. The next few months are huge tests for his presidency.
He doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. What he does have to worry about, every second-term president has to worry about historic legacy. What are the historians going to write? And they are obsessed, these second-term presidents, about how the historians will look at their record, and that's going to be a critical issue for this president.
Republicans in Congress don't have to worry about not getting him reelected, so I think this gives freedom to both sides to act.
All right, hold on, guys. Don't go away. We have more to discuss. We're going to talk about the big winners and the big losers, and I'm not talking about the president or Mitt Romney. We've got some other winners and losers we're talking about also. Election night is a groundbreaking moment for gay Americans. Some of the biggest winners and losers, Kate, were not on the ballot.
They were not on the ballot. We're back here with our team, I like to say, Anna, David, Van. So let's talk about, we know electorally that one person won and one person lost. Let's not even go there. But who do you think were when you look at the election and last night and this bitter battle, who are the biggest winners and losers? Go ahead, Anna.
Biggest losers, I would tell you, are older white men. And biggest winner, I would tell you, except for Bill Clinton, who is an older white man, anybody who is not an older white man, gays, women, Hispanics, African Americans, I think we're all big winners last night.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, the ballot initiatives were really amazing thing to watch.
We're going to have more on that coming up.
Yeah, what do you think, David?
I think
I don't mean to pick on
No. We'll be heard from again.
David and I don't take it personally.
I think Latinos were the big winners last night because they were the sleeping giant in American politics, and they awoke last night. And the numbers on deportation versus path to citizenship, overwhelming support for that. Let me just single out two others as winners. Jerry Brown. This initiative that he got passed, we didn't talk about much last night, but very late last night in California, to raise taxes in order to not have declining schools was a big victory, a substantial victory. It looked like it might go down. One other, Nate Silver. This is the fellow who does these predictions for the New York Times. If
He looks
Florida
at all
goes
the,
for,
he looks at all the polls.
Looks at all the
and he
polls.
studies them. He does these averages.
Right,
And
right.
what was his record last night? What, 100%?
If Florida goes for Obama, he called not only the national election, but every single state. He called every single
quite a
state.
record.
He did not
We-
make one mistake. And you know, they were, some of the right-wingers were really killing him out there.
New York
And he
Times,
was
New York
right,
Times,
yeah.
New York
And
We
you
were-
have to say Nate.
And we're still waiting for the results to come in from Florida.
Please don't pick on Florida.
We love
Sometimes
Florida.
Florida deserves
Listen,
it.
we have stone crabs and beautiful
We
temperatures.
do love your stone crabs, that's for sure. They're my big winner all the time. What do you think, Van?
Two losers, two winners. For me, Karl Rove, I think, really hurt himself because, I mean, he spent $1 billion, doesn't have much to show for it, and was kind of...
Through his super PAC.
Yeah, through his super PAC, and was kind of the last dog barking, saying we're still going to win. I think it's sort of, in some ways, the death of an icon in American politics. I also think that the right-wing talk world is a little bit diminished now because they did create this sort of fact-free environment around this election. But the winners, anybody who cares about liberty and justice for all, has to be excited about marriage equality triumphing. This is a big sea shift in American politics and American life, and I think it's huge. The other winner, the much maligned community organizer. The community organizer who was the scapegoat and demonized by the Republicans won this election. The African-American, Ben Jealous of the NAACP added 1 million black voters through basic community organizing. You had youth organizations like Hoodie Vote, Vote Mob, Dream Defenders groups you've never heard of that turned this election into a youth outpouring with no support from anybody outside of that youth community. Extraordinary victory for community organizers everywhere.
We're going to continue looking at the winners
for a long time to come.
Yep. It's good to have a ground game. All right, guys, thanks
Thanks,
very
guys.
much. And as we mentioned, gay Americans and their supporters are celebrating a string of unprecedented election victories, including a Senate seat. CNN's Ted Rowlands has details.
Wolf, in 2006, this state voted to ban same-sex marriage. But last night, Wisconsin made history by sending Tammy Baldwin to the U.S. Senate. In her acceptance speech Tuesday night, 50-year-old Tammy Baldwin acknowledged her role in history, but tried to downplay its significance.
Now, I am well aware that I will have the honor to be Wisconsin's first woman U.S. Senator. And I am well aware that I will be the first openly gay member. But I didn't run to make history. I ran to make a difference.
Oh, it's a huge day. It's a huge milestone in the history of America.
For 20 years, Paul Fairchild has been fighting for gay rights. He says Baldwin's win will inevitably make a difference.
Once we have openly gay people serving on a federal level, it's much harder to vote against laws that protect us.
Baldwin's victory was one of 5 Tuesday night that some believe signals a sea change in the way more and more American voters view the LGBT community. Maine, Maryland, and it appears Washington have become the first states to legalize same-sex marriage by popular vote. And in Minnesota, voters said no to defining marriage as only between a man and a woman.
I am honored.
Baldwin, who served in the House for 14 years before launching her Senate campaign, defeated former 2-time Wisconsin Governor Tommy Thompson. Despite being openly gay, Baldwin's sexual identity was not a major issue during the campaign and clearly didn't seem to matter to Wisconsin voters.
And part of the reason why it wasn't a big deal has to deal with what were the top issues this year, and it really was about the economy and about jobs.
Besides being the first openly gay member of the Senate, Tammy Baldwin is also the first female to represent the state of Wisconsin in the Senate. In her acceptance speech last night, Wolf, she says she is vowing to fight for all of Wisconsin, specifically the middle class. Wolf?
Very, very important, not only what's happening in Wisconsin, but in other states as well.
Oh, absolutely, watching it very closely. Also, some voters went to the polls full of enthusiasm. Many did, but many left angry and frustrated. What can be done to make sure Americans don't wait hours and hours in those lines to vote? Fears of an election meltdown.
Election
day wasn't exactly problem-free. CNN's Brian Todd has been looking into this for us. Brian, we all saw those extremely long lines in some locations, really kind of across the country. What were some of the other problems that voters faced?
Well, Kate, you had machines jamming up, machines changing votes. In Philadelphia, Republican poll monitors had to be escorted into precincts by sheriff's deputies after some of them had been denied access. But it was congestion at the polling place that seemed to be the biggest embarrassment. Some voters waited in seemingly endless lines to cast ballots.
You know, an hour waiting to scan, that's bad. That is bad.
2 hours, 10 minutes. Yes.
In Plantation, Florida, 4 hours in line. Some people gave up.
People left and they won't come back. They can't come back.
The president, in his hour of glory, even felt compelled to say this.
Whether you voted for the very first time or waited in line for a very long time. By the way, we have to fix that.
Then there were scattered reports of voting machine problems. In Pennsylvania, an embarrassing scene posted on YouTube. One machine indicated a vote for Mitt Romney when a voter tried to choose President Obama. The machine had to be recalibrated. But the lines were the big story in many places, including key swing states. Paul Hernson at the University of Maryland, who keeps close tabs on voting systems, says the backups shouldn't be happening, but there are several reasons they do. Congestion often builds, he says, in communities that can't afford to streamline voting.
Those communities, counties usually have to decide between paying money for voting systems and election administration, roads, bridges, and hospitals. And of course, voting systems come in last.
But other issues cropped up as well, depending on where you were voting. In some places in Florida, the ballots were 12 pages long. Another big factor, Hernson says, was the decision by some states to cut back the number of early voting days. Some state legislatures rammed through voter ID laws, requiring people to show photo IDs, fill out affidavits and other forms if they didn't have them. Plenty of people had no trouble, and there's no indication that any of this tilted the outcome of the election. But there's little doubt this is now a patchwork system that's messy, unwieldy, different in every state. How do you fix this? Should there be just one system, federally mandated, streamlined for everybody?
Well, it would be very difficult to fix it by having one system. The states have primary authority for conducting elections, and some of them pass that authority down to the counties and give them leeway in implementation. And it would be extremely challenging because each state has its own traditions, its own culture.
Hernson says there is no one big fix. He says after the 2000 Florida recount, the federal government allocated some money to try to improve things and created an agency called the Election Assistance Commission. Hernson says the problem with that body is that it doesn't work very well. It's not well funded, and we checked on this. It's been without all 4 of its designated commissioners for almost a year now. A spokesman for the commission told us it doesn't have any regulatory authority. The commission can offer advice to the states on how to streamline voting, he says, but it can't tell them what to do. Kate and Wolf, President Obama says he wants to fix this. He's got no agency with which to fix it.
Yeah, it's just amazing that the amount of time people were waiting in lines yesterday, it's just so frustrating
Unreal.
For voters. I know.
Right.
Brian Todd, thanks so much.
Makes
You've
my
been saying
blood
it too.
boil. This kind of stuff still goes on.
I just want to vote. You know?
Go vote. It shouldn't take 6 hours to vote.
I know.
People have to work. Aaron Burdett is here. Thanks so much for coming.
All kinds of ideas on how to solve that. Exactly. Yeah.
Aaron, it's good to have you here at the CNN elections. And you did a great job in Ohio yesterday, Columbus, Ohio. Let's talk a little bit about what happened on Wall Street.
Yeah, not such a good day for
you
Wall
know
Street.
very, very well. This is the worst plunge in a year, 300 points?
It is the worst plunge in a year. And, a lot of it was the U.S. election. And really the fact that there
When you
were...
say the U.S. election, you think investors were nervous about Obama's winning?
Yes, I think. Now, look, investors, one of the biggest investors in the world, Bill Gross of PIMCO, said to me a while ago, look, we need to cut $1.6 trillion a year. Both of the guys running for president are going to run $1 trillion deficits a year. Neither one of them were seen as a person who's going to come in and solve this. But there was a very clear view that under the president, there could be a real delay on dealing with the fiscal cliff, which the market's very worried about. That's part of the reason that stocks sold off today. But they really think they're not going to get a deal. We're not going to have spending cuts. And so that's really why you saw it. But keep in mind, the day after an election is often a weekday. And the president's past 4 years have been very good for the market.
It was
Actually
down
outstanding
at
for the market.
6,500, 7,000. Yes. It's now 13,000. It's almost doubled, if you will.
That's right. And, you know, the president has some things out there that he said he wants to do. For example, you know, if you have dividends, and that doesn't mean just wealthy people, that means a lot of older people who are watching right now, your tax on dividends could go up significantly. That suddenly means they're worth less. So that's a lot of what was being priced into the market today. But we'll see if they do a deal on Capitol Hill. Maybe there'll be a deal on some of those things. It isn't quite as draconian as the market sees it now.
We're looking forward to the top of the hour. Aaron Burnett out front.
Loving being here in D.C.
Come visit us a little bit more often.
It's
a little chilly. I can
yes,
offer you a sweater.
I just, as a woman, I can agree with Kate.
Yeah.
Wolf, I'm sure you feel just fine.
I feel very comfortable.
Exactly. That's exactly how it should be. So Jeannie Moos, of course, has been combing through hours and hours of election coverage. Up next, she'll show us some of the
We have
more
another major
unusual
projection
moments
to make right now in another key battleground state. First Family has just arrived back at the White House. Take a look at this. Let's see if we can hear what the president's saying.
President, do you believe you have a mandate for your second term?
Thank you, guys. Very nice. They're back home now, at least for the next 4 years. He's been reelected. I'm sure the girls are happy. The First Lady's happy. They're all happy.
Where they're going to call home. It was the moment of truth on last night's election coverage. Our Jeannie Moos looks at how the networks called the election.
If you missed the moment live, let's relive it.
President Obama has been reelected
President of the United States.
It was a hard-fought battle.
The Colbert Report is ready to project that CNN has projected, that Animal Planet has predicted, that the winner of the 2012 presidential election is Barack Obama.
Talk about a thoughtful pundit. After painting a bleak picture of President Obama's second term, Fox commentator Dr. Charles Krauthammer joked,
"So as a psychiatrist, I will offer to write prescriptions for anybody who needs them right now."
But Obama supporters were ecstatic. CNN even cut away to some in Kenya. Speaking of which, what would election night be without a Donald Trump angle? After Mitt Romney's loss, Trump tweeted, "This election is a total sham and travesty. We should have a revolution in this country," which prompted NBC's Brian Williams to launch this zinger.
Donald Trump, who has driven well past the last exit to relevance.
The exit for Mitt Romney was Ohio, but after Fox News called Ohio for Obama, the network's own best-known commentator objected.
We got to be careful about calling things.
That's awkward.
Once Karl Rove questioned the call by Fox's decision desk, Megyn Kelly walked back there.
He said, "Whoa, careful.
Live camera in tow.
Keep coming. Here we go."
We're actually quite comfortable with the call in Ohio.
But the anchor who got the most flack was ABC's Diane Sawyer.
Can we have our music? Because this is another big one here.
Viewers thought her delivery was strange. "I'll have what Diane Sawyer is having," tweeted singer Josh Groban.
President Barack Obama has won Minnesota.
Someone else tweeted, "And Diane Sawyer declares tonight's winner is Chardonnay." Officially, ABC wouldn't comment, but staffers suggest Diane was just exhausted from hurricane coverage and debate prep. And what's an anchor supposed to do when she gets a call of nature while she's in the middle of calling states?
I came back from the bathroom and said that Colorado was still too close to call. Nobody told me while I was in the bathroom Colorado went for President Obama. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it.
One thing networks don't project are bathroom breaks. Jeannie Moos, CNN.
Good news for Mitt Romney. He has won tonight, and we can announce this right now, most of the Confederacy.
New York.
Our second story out front, the GOP in disarray. Republicans didn't only lose the White House, they did lose 3 Senate seats last night also. Senator John Cornyn, the chair of the group responsible for getting Republicans elected to the Senate, admitted early this morning that his party needs to reassess. And I'll quote him, he said, "While some will want to blame one wing of the party over the other, the reality is candidates from all corners of our GOP lost tonight. Clearly, we have work to do in the weeks and months ahead." So, how does the Republican Party regain its footing? Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell is the chairman of the Republican Governors Association, as we said, rising star in the party, and we appreciate your taking the time to join us tonight, Governor. So, how does the Republican Party go about recalibrating? I mean, it's fair to say that a couple of days ago, so many in the Republican Party really believed they could win this. And at least when you look at Electoral College, you look at your state, it wasn't even close.
No, it was a very disappointing night. President and his team deserve a lot of credit for running a very organized campaign, and they did a good job getting their votes out. It was closer this year, 2.5 points in Virginia versus 7 last time. But we did win 8 out of the 11 congressional seats and picked up 30 new governors now for the Republican team, which is the highest level in 12 years, maybe another one in Washington State that's still counting. So there were some bright spots, but overall, I agree. We've got to do better. It's a combination of tone and message and reaching out to new and minority voters and making sure we do a better job on the ground. And we got beat last night.
Well, I mean, you're gracious to come out and directly admit it, although you are right. On the governor's side, I know it's a sort of a record for Republican governors there, so that was a positive point. But one of the wings that Cornyn was referring to within the GOP was the Tea Party. And some big-name Tea Partiers lost last night. Joe Walsh lost in Illinois. Josh Mandel lost in Ohio, where I spent the night last night. Richard Murdoch in Indiana. Now, obviously, Murdoch had a specific set of specific situation there with the comments he made on abortion. But I think the question is the Tea Party still relevant? I mean, that was part of the reason your party rose, but is it now become an albatross?
Well, Aaron, with the Tea Party and other conservatives that believe we ought to reform entitlements and get our country out of debt and back to a balanced budget, I think that's pretty a mainstream idea. They helped me immensely to an 18-point victory in Virginia 3 years ago. I think it's how we organize, it's how we deliver the message. We've got to be a lot more inclusive and open and energetic and wanting people to join our team by expressing why these conservative values are good for people of all races, creeds, colors, and national origin. We just got to do a better job with that. So I think it's a lot of energy that still helps us immensely at the polls and getting people out. We just got out-organized on the ground last night.
All right, out-organized on the ground's how you describe it, but Tea Party Patriots co-founder Jenny Beth Martin had this to say about Mitt Romney. Here she is.
We wanted a fighter like Ronald Reagan. What we got was a weak, moderate candidate handpicked by the Beltway elites and country club establishment wing of the Republican Party. The presidential loss is unequivocally on them.
What's your response to that?
Well, I respectfully disagree. This is the way the process works. We have lengthy primaries. We had 20 debates, and the people chose. This is the way our party works. Listen, Mitt Romney, as I've gotten to know him over the last year, he's an incredibly smart, talented, decent guy who worked very hard and I thought was a good messenger for our fiscal and social conservative cause. And this was a dead heat going in the election. In fact, 2 weeks ago, before the hurricane, Aaron, we were actually up by 3 to 5 points in swing states, and we thought we were heading towards a victory. So, you know, I'm not going to recriminate. We've just got to realize what we did right, what we did wrong, improve, and do a better job on delivering a message and organizing on the ground. But hand it to the president for running a good closing argument and a good ground game.
So what does someone like you think about 2016? You know, obviously you're one of the names that could be running. So what are you focusing on, Ben? Is it really focused all the time on reaching out on immigration into Hispanics?
Well, I think it's 24 hours after the polls close, Aaron, so I'm not thinking about 2016. I'm thinking about being governor of Virginia with a legislative session coming up. But clearly, I think the future of the parties with Republican governors, like I said, we got 30. We may have 31 when Washington State finishes counting on Friday with Rob McKenna. And I think that the leaders that are in our party, that are conservatives, that are CEOs of the states, that are balancing budgets without raising taxes, not making excuses, getting jobs created, this is where the message is going to come on how we can govern better than the way Washington's governing now with Democratic rule. And so I think we're going to see more of those leaders rise up.
Governor McDonald, thank you so much for your time, sir. Really appreciate it. And still out front, the president got reelected on a coalition that did not count on white men. Is that group's influence gone forever? And the Northeast, already reeling from Superstorm Sandy, now being hit with another powerful storm, literally at this moment at its peak. We'll be back. Our third story out front hit again. A powerful nor'easter, as it's called, bearing down on the East Coast tonight. 60-mile-an-hour winds, wintry mix. There's snow in many places, coastal flooding. It's slamming some of the areas hardest hit by Sandy. 600,000 in the New York, New Jersey area have no power and no heat. 8,000 are in shelters after their homes were destroyed after Sandy. Many today who had just gotten power back lost it again. Last week, I went to see some of the most devastated areas on Staten Island, where CNN's Rob Marciano is live tonight with the latest. Rob, I know you've spent the day there. What is the current conditions? It doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. Can you believe this? I mean, this is a week after a tropical system, or nearly tropical system, moved through this area and crushed it, as you know, from Jersey through this Staten Island area, across Queens, Manhattan, and Long Island, and Connecticut. Now, it's coming down in almost blizzard conditions. We've had wind gusts on eastern Long Island and Buzzards Bay across Massachusetts of 76 miles an hour. We've got over a half a foot of snow in some parts. Here, we've got probably 3 inches, maybe even 4 inches of snow on the ground. You know, this time of year, if it's sticking on the ground, it's coming down pretty hard because the ground is so warm. So one thing that's good is that we didn't have a surge like we were afraid of. So this is an area that had water up and over my shoulders when Sandy came through. Devastating floods to this community. That surge didn't happen, but certainly without power and heat, cold and snow and wind tonight is not boding well for these folks.
And Rob, how are people coping? Because I know so many of them were afraid, they didn't have anywhere to go, and when they were given an alternative, they didn't want to leave because they were worried about looting or worried about their belongings. So where are people going?
Well, a lot of people are hanging tough. We're at the Camerados household. There you go. There's Diane, Vincent, and Anthony making the best of a bad situation. Nice looking snowman there, guys. Let's go inside and show you what sadly, what the inside of their house looks like. They've got a lot of their inside of the house out here to dry it out. That's how this entire neighborhood looks like. People just pulled everything out of the inside to dry things out. They've ripped up the floor. They've ripped off the sheetrock. They only have lights in here because they're plugged into our satellite. They've been without power now and heat for over 7 or 8 days now. Finally cranked up the indoor heater there. They do have carbon monoxide monitors going just in case. They're a little bit nervous about that, but they're hanging tough. They're sleeping upstairs, all in the same bedroom, and there's a lot of people in this neighborhood doing the same thing, Aaron.
Oh. All right, well, images are very powerful images. Thanks so much to Rob Marciano. Well, out front next, was Jeb Bush right? President Obama won the overwhelming support of Latinos, the fastest growing segment of the American population. Is the GOP doomed without them? Plus, pot. How marijuana helped the president win. Welcome back to the second half of Out Front. We start with stories we care about, where we focus on our reporting from the front lines. And we begin tonight with the director of a controversial anti-Islam film who has been sentenced to a year in federal prison for probation violations. Mark Baselli Youssef admitted to charges which accuse him of using an alias that violated the terms of his probation from a 2010 bank fraud case. Youssef is the filmmaker behind Innocence of Muslims, the movie that was blamed by some for sparking riots throughout the Muslim world and was initially blamed for the attack in Libya. The Greek parliament has approved a new set of austerity measures. Greek leaders needed to pass a $17.2 billion program to try to get more bailout money. The package cuts spending and pensions. It raises taxes and the retirement age. As many as 70,000 people took to the streets of Athens to protest the measures. Some threw Molotov cocktails, which forced police to fight back with tear gas. One analyst tells us Greece is being asked to take on a lot of fiscal pain. He says we'll see a lot more stress in the region over the next couple of weeks. Keep in mind, round after round of austerity, and it still seems to be getting worse in Greece. Former Penn State University President Graham Spanier was arraigned today on charges he tried to cover up allegations that Jerry Sandusky was sexually abusing boys on the school campus. Among the charges Spanier faces, obstruction of justice, endangering the welfare of children, and perjury. CNN contributor Sarah Ganim reports Spanier's bail is set at $125,000, but it is unsecured. So that means he doesn't have to pay it unless he actually fails to show up for a court date. He will not be allowed to travel outside of the state without the court's permission. Well, after meeting with the president of Burkina Faso, one militant group in Mali is urging other rebels to start a political dialogue, and it's an important group, at least from our understanding when we were covering that story on the border. The armed group Ansar al-Din is one of many. to have taken over the northern part of Mali, and now representatives from that group are calling for a halt of hostilities in the region. What does that mean, though? Here in the U.S., State Department spokesman Victoria Nuland today welcomed the announcement, but says the group has only talked the talk and needs to walk the walk and actually work on a deal. Well, it's been 461 days since the U.S. lost its top credit rating. It is now time to ask, what are we going to do to get it back? Because the election's over. Congress and Mr. President, the next 7 weeks, you better do something. And now our fourth story out front. President Obama won re-election last night despite getting only 39% of the white vote, 20 percentage points behind Romney. Now, other crucial voting blocks carried the president to victory, and that's raising major red flags for the Republican Party today. John King is breaking down the numbers. And John, I know, Democrats made major gains among Latinos, women, suburban voters, all of those things. I want to break each of those down. Let's start with Latinos, because I know there it was a finally double digit in terms of Latino vote.
Giant. And this is a generational problem for the Republican Party if they don't figure it out. You mentioned the white vote. Giant slice of the electorate, 72%. It's colored red because Governor Romney won it. But look down here, 13% African Americans. That's stable from 2008. The president kept that part of his coalition intact. He won more than 9 in 10 African American votes. As you know, Darren, for the first time nationally, Latinos hit double digits. And look at this, 71%, even higher than his number 4 years ago. 71% of the Latino vote nationally goes to President Obama. That's nationally. Now let's swing this over and let's look at it by states. In Nevada, the white vote was down because why? In Nevada, the Latino vote is 19%. Nevada used to be a swing state. Look at this, 71% again in the state of Nevada, one of the key battlegrounds. Let me just slide this over and give you one more example. The state of Colorado, once a red state, now a purple state. The Latino vote now double digits, and again, when you bring it up, 75%. Let's look over here, and I'll just show you how this plays out. President wins Nevada, once a swing state. Wins Colorado, once a Republican state. Wins New Mexico. We didn't talk about that last night. This used to be one of the classic swing states in American politics. We don't even think about it anymore, right? And he's probably going to win Florida. They're still counting there. Why do I circle those? Watch this. I'm going to slide this little barrier here, come across.
Yeah.
The darker the colors, the higher the Latino population. Look at these states. I didn't even say California. That's been a Democratic state forever. But Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Florida. You can find other places as well up into the Midwest. If the Republicans don't solve this problem, it's not just 4 more years for Barack Obama. This is a crisis for the Republican Party.
It certainly is. We're going to talk much more about Texas in a bit, because obviously I see that orange there. What about women? Because I know this war on women fight, a lot of people wonder whether it would be effective, but when it actually happened,
in a word, yes.
Romney did not make up that gap again.
It was effective. Come back over here. We'll play the exit polls. When we move this over, let me slide this one out of the way. Nationally, less than half the electorate is men. Governor Romney wins it. But look, this is not rocket science. 53% of the electorate are women. You see it's blue. They're going for President Obama. If you're getting 55% among the biggest chunk of the electorate, guess what? You are well on your path to victory just there. And again, let's play it out. Let's just not talk nationally. Let's move it over. You go through the battleground states, a closer split here, but the president won both men and women in Colorado. But you start getting here 51%. Again, it used to be a classic swing state. You say that's not much. He's winning in states Republicans used to dominate. And then you come over here. This is the mother of all battlegrounds. Welcome back from Columbus. 52% of the electorate in Ohio are women. And again, the president gets 55%. And so the combination of the diversity of the Obama coalition, college-educated women particularly, Africans and Latinos, you add it up. Simple math. As Bill Clinton said at the Democratic Convention, sometimes it's just arithmetic.
Yeah, sometimes in that speech that was lauded by all. Now, there was another area, though, that is traditionally Republican, the suburbs. Always been seen that way. But that also shifted.
It shifted. And let's go back over to this map. And let me turn off the Latino demographic. And we'll do a little tier and then turn this up. If you look at this, close presidential elections, if you go back to when George Bush won in 2000, when George Bush won in 2004, close presidential elections in American politics are won in the suburbs. You see, this is the 2000 election. You see George W. Bush, I'm going back in time here, winning in the Denver suburbs, right? You see there the president wins right in downtown. The Democrats win in downtown. That's Senator Kerry in that year. But now let's come forward to 2012. Look at all this area. It's blue. In the key swing states, the Democrats dominate in the suburbs. Let's come back over here. You come up to Ohio. And let's make sure it's here. Now, Mitt Romney actually did a good job. He won Lake County, which is a trouble spot. That's a big suburb just outside of Cleveland. He won there. But look down here around Columbus. Oops, sorry. Let me hold this down. Outside of the Columbus city where you were in, the president wins in the suburbs. Down here in Cincinnati and around here, this has to be look at this election. Let's go back to 2004. See, Hamilton County, that's Cincinnati and the suburbs around it. When it's red, Republicans win the state. When it's blue, as it was in 2012 and as it was in 2008, the Democrats carry it. Why? Because of the suburbs. And the suburbs is one of the reasons that Pennsylvania, Romney made a play there in the end. Look down here around Philadelphia. Let me put the telestrator back on. Look down here around Philadelphia, all the close-in suburbs there. You have to go way back in time. That used to be Republican territory. But look, in 2012, Obama wins it. 4 years ago, he won it. In 2004, he carried it as well. This is why this has been a Democratic state for so long. You have to go back and back and back. You have to go back to George H.W. Bush, to when Republicans were competitive in the moderate suburbs around Philadelphia. Again, Latinos, African Americans, has been a long-time crisis. Suburbs, especially suburban women, in the big states like this, where the suburbs are key, the Republicans, Aaron, have a problem.
All right, John King, thank you very much. Well, with Democrats making such major gains among Latinos, among women, among suburban voters, what can the GOP do to make up ground? Out front tonight, former White House Deputy Press Secretary Bill Burton, also a senior strategist with Priorities USA, the super PAC that supported President Obama. I'm sure you're going to be glad to not have to raise money for a little while. Yeah, that's a terrible job. Our Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez and our chief political analyst Gloria Borger. Leslie, let me start with you, because when John started out talking about the Latino vote, I mean, these numbers are pretty shocking and pretty overwhelming. Bush in 2004, 44% of the vote, of the Latino vote. McCain in 2008, 31%, and now Mitt Romney at 27%. What happened to the inroads made by George W. Bush?
Well, there's no coattails. With Hispanics and GOP, they really don't exist. Latinos vote for a candidate, not for a party, because for many in the Latino community, the Republican brand is very tarnished. It's a community that's seen as somebody, as an entity doesn't care for the Latino community or those interests, which are all these very false stereotypes. But, Aaron, I think you got to look at the fact over the last 40 years, Republicans earned 30% of the Hispanic vote. No more, no less. That's about the average. And we understood if we do not get up into the 37, 38, 39% Hispanic support, the Republican Party will fail to win national elections from probably 2012 on.
I mean, that's a pretty incredible thing. Now, I don't know if you saw what John King was putting up that map of the densely populated areas by Hispanics. I mean, there's a state that stands out there, and that state was Texas. I mean, are we now looking at a point where Texas could be something that you could make a play for as a Democrat?
I think that Texas is no doubt going to be a purple state, either in 2016 or in 2020. It's just a place where the way the population is changing is just going to be better for Democrats. Now, what Mitt Romney failed to do during this entire election is make a strong case to Hispanic voters why they shouldn't feel the way about him that they suspected watching him try to run to the right of Rick Perry in the primary. He got into the general election. He never made a case to Hispanic voters. No real money was spent on Hispanic outlets by the Romney campaign. And I think as a result, he really had no place to grow his support.
But there's two things with that. I think a tremendous amount of money was put into this election for Latino. By comparison of what they should be doing on both sides, not at all where it should be. In Texas, I'd have to argue you have Ted Cruz, who's the first Hispanic senator coming out of Texas. Democrats would like to believe the demography is destined to lean to the Democratic Party. As Latinos grow, they're going to naturally move in. Majority of Latinos will be Democratic, but there are many split-ticket voters, many conservative Democrat Latinos who can find a place in the Republican Party with the right candidate and the right message.
And, of course, there's people like Marco Rubio, who said earlier this week on this show, before the election even happened, that the Republicans need to reach out more. Gloria, what about the flip side of this, though? You know, 3/4 of the voters still are white in this country, and the president really did not do well, particularly among white men. Is that a red flag for the Democratic Party, or just given the view that demographics may be destiny, it just doesn't matter?
Well, you know, it depends on which way you look at it. I mean, they've always known that they have a problem with white men, particularly because of the economic issues. But when you look at the question of who cares most about my problems, you know, the president overwhelmingly did very well, and a lot of those people are white, blue-collar working men, which is one of the reasons he won, of course, in the state of Ohio. I think the larger problem, quite frankly, is for the Republican Party, because you see that the percentage of the white electorate shrunk, right, from 74 to 72. And I think, you know, that is a problem for Republicans, because they need to start reaching out. You're just talking about Latinos. You know, that's a growing community in this country. And I think, you know, if the Republican Party doesn't wake up and say, okay, you know what? We need to figure out a way to do immigration reform, because there is no reason we should be alienating minorities who, as Leslie points out, might naturally be with us, right?
Well, Bill,
so
I mean, Bill,
think it's a larger problem on the other side. Yeah.
Bill, I mean, my question on this, when you look at the Hispanic vote, in so many ways, it seems like it should be natural for some of them to vote GOP.
Right.
I mean, religious and family-oriented. I mean, there are conservative values there that might fit with that party.
There are ways that Mitt Romney could have made a case that he could have dovetailed into the Hispanic community. But, you know, on what Gloria said, I actually am concerned as a Democrat that the demographics are not great for us going into 2016 because, you know, the next candidate on the ballot is not going to be Barack Obama. We're not going to get the kind of margins that we got with the African-American community, likely. We're not going to have a Republican candidate who only gets 27% with the Hispanic community. So I actually think that Democrats do need to find a way to recognize that there is an issue with white voters and figure out how to reach out and find language that works there.
You know, Bill makes
You are the only white male in the conversation here, so.
You know, he makes a really interesting point because if you look at the Republican candidates who are winning, especially the ones winning statewide, Marco Rubio or Susana Martinez or Ted Cruz, they are winning across the board, not in minority-majority districts. They are winning, you know, with all spectrums of the voting electorate. That's significant for the Republican Party. It points to the fact we're building a backbench, what our future leaders are going to, Luis Fortuno, what our leaders are going to look like in the future. That's the bright side. On the negative side, you have a lot of young Latinos who consistently believe that the Republican Party doesn't connect with them in any way. That's a whole generation we cannot afford to lose.
Final word, Gloria.
Here's the problem. You know, in the end, Mitt Romney did not get through with his economic message. And, you know, as you go through this primary season and the whole election season, as you know, Aaron, Mitt Romney, in the end, was sort of starting to do pretty well on who's better able to handle the economy.
Right.
And as you saw in the exit polls last night, the president was completely at parity with Mitt Romney on who's better able to handle the economy, but he did so much better on who cares about my problems and who understands the middle class. And I think the Republican Party, heading into the discussions we've got over the fiscal cliff and the question of who's going to solve the debt crisis, who's going to solve the financial crisis, who's going to get us more jobs, I think that's an issue the Republicans in Congress now have to think of because that's where they failed in the election.
All right, thanks so much to all three. We appreciate it. And out front next, it wasn't just the minority voters or women who helped the president secure 4 more years in the White House. You remember Karl Rove's whole thing, you know, put a little ballot initiative on that riles up your base on the far right? Well, they did it on the far left, and we'll tell you what it was. Plus, Iran could become the biggest challenge the president faces in the next 4 years. But my sources are telling me about Iran's reaction to Obama's victory. Out front next. We are back with tonight's Outer Circle, where we reach out to our sources around the world. And we begin with reaction to the president's re-election in the Middle East, focus of a lot of our coverage here on Out Front. The influential Egyptian blogger Sand Monkey tweeted, "Obama keeps his house and job. Congratulations, B." And, you know, we saw this last night as the results were coming in, all of my tweets coming in from that part of the world. There was a lot of excitement. One of my sources in the region told me the whole of the Middle East wanted to vote, all excited about Obama. Important to note, this is someone who said they would be most certainly hit by higher tax rates and happy to pay them for the privilege of living in the United States of America. But the pressing issues still loom large, perhaps none more than Iran. I asked our Reza Saya how the results will affect Iran's nuclear program.
Aaron, it didn't matter who won these elections. Iran had made it clear that it planned to press forth with its nuclear program no matter what. Mr. Romney, of course, had attacked Mr. Obama, saying he had failed to stop Iran's nuclear program, but he never said how he was going to do things differently. This nuclear program, a complicated issue because Iran has tied it to its national pride and identity, a way to show the world that it won't back down to Washington. Sanctions don't appear to be working, and no one's suggesting attacking Iran anymore other than some Israeli leaders. Many say what will break this deadlock is a deal where both sides can say they gained something. But how do you do that? Does Washington concede something? If so, what? Important questions Mr. Obama will mull over in his second term. Aaron?
And thanks to Reza. And now our fifth story out front, turning the social tide. For the first time in history, voters in 4 states voted to legalize same-sex marriage last night. In Colorado and Washington state, voters okayed the legalization of marijuana. Well, that'll set the stage for a standoff with the federal government. maybe the president will go along with it. All right, but did these ballot measures, did they influence turnout? That's the crucial question, because Colorado was a swing state. We all know that, up for grabs. Voters there supported the marijuana measure by 55 to 45%, and the president eked out a 4% win. He also won Maryland, Washington, and Maine. Now, obviously, not all of those swing states. Out front tonight, CNN contributors John Avlon, Eric Erickson, and Sasha Eisenberg, author of The Victory Lab, The Secret Science of Winning Campaigns. So, Sasha, overall, you know, Karl Rove was credited with this on the Republican side. Put a ballot measure on people care about. It'll get them to the poll. It'll get your guy elected. Did it work in Colorado, do you think?
I mean, I don't think there was a sort of organized effort to put these on the ballot, but we do see from the sort of quick look at the exit polls that there was a slightly higher turnout among 18 to 29-year-olds in Colorado than there was in the rest of the country. You know, campaigns are always... One of the issues that goes on in elections is that campaigns tend to assume that the presidency, the top of the ticket, drives turnout. This is the type of issue where I think you could see that there are people who would be brought to the polls because of their, you know, interest, especially young voters, their interest in pot, who might not be sort of part of a typical sort of mobilization effort from campaigns, just not people who would get a campaign's attention, but could be motivated to come out nonetheless. And my bet is we'll know a little bit more about what exactly happened there as the numbers come in.
Eric, Karl Rove's strategy was a ban on gay marriage, put it on 11 states. George W. Bush won 9 of those 11 states. Right. Now, obviously here, you know, some of the states we were talking about on the marriage, gay marriage issue were not swing states. But I mean, let's talk about Colorado. Wouldn't have turned the whole election, but...
Yeah, you know, I actually think what's happening when you look at the X's and you break it down, what happened is Barack Obama's wave helped push those issues. In fact, I think it was Minnesota where in 2009 the same issue was on the ballot and it went down, and it's on the ballot this year with Barack Obama's wave. I think you have to be careful analyzing these things. It really looks like in these states it was a Barack Obama wave that helped get these elected, get these passed, not these issues getting Barack Obama nominated.
And what about gay marriage, John Avlon? I mean, this is pretty overwhelming. In Maine, 53% said yes, 47% no. In Maryland, 52% yes, 48% no. How significant is that?
It's very significant. I mean, Maine was the state that in 2009 had actually voted this down. So you've got a real bellwether here. You know, Eric's right to the extent that a presidential election, you're going to have higher turnout. So ballot initiatives are more likely to get a representative sample. What we've seen in the last couple of years on same-sex marriage equality, is it hitting a tipping point, a narrow majority of Americans supporting it, really sort of along those lines, 52-48. Yes. So I think that, and also the marijuana legalization in Colorado, what you saw is the older voters not supporting it, younger voters were. So you're looking at a generational change. I know, stunning. I know, but you know, it's significant to this extent. What these ballot initiatives are doing is it's showing where we're going as a country. It could be good news for Republicans if they identify more with their libertarian roots, but there are changes afoot about both on marriage equality and marijuana legalization that are going to be the new normal down the line.
But Eric, what do you do about that? Because these are issues in this campaign that were front and center. Right. I mean, the whole party platform from the Republican Party on abortion being another issue when most Americans support exceptions. What's your party do?
I don't know what the party does at this point. I think they have to assess it. I would say this. It looks like, you know, you said 52-48. The interesting thing about these issues in those states, particularly gay marriage, is that it wins in the polls in pretty much every state and has always failed at the ballot, except this time. Right. And what I really think this is Barack Obama's voters going out to support it. Were they on the ballot in 2014? Maybe not, because the turnout won't be so high. So social conservatives, though, are looking at these, and they're saying, at least with gay marriage, this is happening at the polls and not happening by judges.
And Sasha, you study how campaigns target voters based on these issues. So what are the next things they should be targeting? Or should they be pushing this, you know, Eric's raising the question, across more states, especially coming midterms?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there will be always interest in using sort of out-of-the-box issues that candidates don't necessarily engage in, but they can change the composition of the electorate. And I think Democrats are particularly interested. You know, one of the things that Bill mentioned in the last segment is that Democrats are going to have to figure out how to run for office without Barack Obama at the top of their ticket. And that means they're going to need to find new ways to bring minorities and young people into the process who were part of their 2008 coalition, part of their 2012 coalition, but still are not really habitual voters. And my guess is that if they can find social or cultural issues that can help motivate those voters and connect with them, that they'll look at them.
Democrats in Michigan tried this as well with a union ballot to boost union membership. Turns out the voters rejected it, so they still have to be careful what they put on the ballot.
Right.
People are smart. Direct democracy.
People are smart. All right, thanks to all three, and out front next. So the campaign is finally over. And, you know, we've all been saying, oh, we're so exhausted. We're glad it's over. Oh, you know what? we're going to look back at some of the things the candidates wish you'd forget, but you won't. The very long campaign season finally over. And as happy as we are to see it go, we will miss the ups and downs of the campaign trail. Sometimes it seemed both parties would say anything. Other times it was like they didn't know what they were saying at all.
You said that you had run a 2-hour and 50-something marathon. It turned out that, of course, it was actually over 4 hours.
I've just lost perspective on what normal times are.
But folks, I can tell you, and I've known 8 presidents, 3 of the minimum.
Morning, y'all. I like grits. I love Big Bird.
There's never been a day in the last 4 years I've been proud to be his vice president. Not one single day.
I'm not familiar precisely with exactly what I said, but I stand by what I said, whatever it was.
A 3-letter word. Jobs. J-O-B-S. Jobs.
Join me in welcoming the next president of the United States, Paul Ryan.
Stamped with 3 proud words, made in the USA.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. We begin tonight in Washington after a history-making election night with 2 simple words. What next? What next for the men and women in the Capitol behind me in a Democratic Senate and Republican House? What next? What next for the party that tried and failed to retake the Senate and White House, who ran on a platform that a majority of Americans saw as too extreme and a demographic base that now seems just too narrow? What next for them? What next for the man who won re-election despite a slow-healing economy, who returned from Chicago tonight and came home to face rapidly approaching challenges on taxes, the budget, the global economy, and a whole lot more? For President Obama, what next? Today, markets took a nosedive in part because investors see what is coming and worry that Washington simply cannot fix it. And that's why we are here tonight again. In the speeches last night and the statements today, everyone from President Obama to Mitt Romney to the leaders in the building behind me all found ways of saying they get it. They understand the challenges and will rise to meet them. Listen.
We want our children to live in America that isn't burdened by debt, that isn't weakened by inequality, that isn't threatened by the destructive power of a warming planet.
The nation, as you know, is at a critical point. At a time like this, we can't risk partisan bickering and political posturing.
If there's a mandate in yesterday's results, it's a mandate for us to find a way to work together on the solutions to the challenges that we all face as a nation.
It's better to dance than to fight. It's better to work together. Everything doesn't have to be a fight.
Well, tonight, what is next on the fiscal cliff, on the rest of the president's agenda, on whether and how Republicans will deal with a diverse electorate? Tonight, we are looking forward, not so much looking back to last night. We begin with Dana Bash on the coming fiscal cliff when tax cuts expire and automatic budget cuts kick in. Dana?
Well, first of all, welcome to the Capitol.
Yeah,
on that issue, you heard everybody sort of singing this Kumbaya tune, but when you got down to the next sentence, of course, there was a but. You heard John Boehner in particular talking about the fact that on the issue that has divided them over the past year or so on this fiscal cliff issue, taxes, saying very clearly he does not want to raise taxes, but he also put out an olive branch, Anderson. He did say that maybe he would be for some kind of raising some kind of revenue. Didn't give any specifics about what that means, but talked about broad tax reform as it relates to entitlement reform. On the other side of the Capitol, though, you saw right over there the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, really clearly feeling like he has the leverage here, not just because of what the voters said on the issue of taxes, because it really was a clear-cut issue between President Obama and Mitt Romney, but also because of just the mechanics of it, Anderson. If nobody does anything, taxes for everybody will go up. So Democrats realize that, so they do feel like they have the leverage, and they're probably right.
And there is motivation to try to do something on that. There was a private conference call Boehner had with his caucus. What do you know about it?
Well, we're told from a source who was on the call, this was a call with all House Republicans were invited to this, that he was very sober, and he did try to buck everybody up and say, in fact, the words he used is that we are the last line of defense from an America that Barack Obama would design. But he also had a clear message for his rank and file, which is hold your fire. I need to have some running room, not to mix too many metaphors here, but I need to have some running room to figure out how we can do this the right way. And the other thing that I'm told that he said to them is that he won't let the White House box him in, but he can't be boxed out either. He knows that he's going to have to negotiate big time, and he's going to be the point person with the president, just like they were in those failed talks a year ago.
We'll see what President Obama does to try to reach out to Boehner and repair that relationship as well, and vice versa, I should say. Dana Bash, appreciate that. I want to turn next to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who famously said just a couple days ago, if Mitt Romney loses and Republicans say it's because he wasn't conservative enough, he'll, quote, go nuts. Senator, Americans, first of all, how are you doing?
Have you gone nuts? Because I've heard a lot of them saying just that.
Well, I just think the honest truth is that we have a problem. If we'd got 40% of the Hispanic vote, Mitt Romney would be president. 43, Bush 43 got 41%, McCain got 31%, and Romney got 27%.
We're going in the wrong direction.
So how do you change that? I mean, how do you change that? You've got, because you have extremes in your party who certainly on the immigration issue, for instance, don't want to see some sort of a compromise.
Yeah. Well, here's what I want to see. I want to see a solution that will not lead to 12 million illegal immigrants 20 years from now, and I'm willing to deal with the 12 million in a firm and fair way, but I want a comprehensive solution that prevents the third wave of illegal immigration. That's all I ask, and I think that's all most Americans want. I think most Hispanic voters, they didn't have a real fondness for President Obama. His job approval rating among Hispanics was about 50%. I just think they saw him as a lesser of two evils between Obama and us, because he didn't really lift a finger to do comprehensive immigration reform like he promised. So we'll be back in the game. Immigration is a national issue. It's just not a Hispanic issue. It's an American issue. And there's a solution to be found out there if people want to find it.
Senator, Americans are going to see massive tax increases if Congress fails to strike a deal on the so-called fiscal cliff. And it's not just tax increases, also massive budget cuts. Every single American will feel the effects. What level of hope do you have tonight that Congress can really come together to strike a deal? Because there's always talk about, oh, yeah, we're going to work together, and then it just never materializes.
Right. It's pretty high, actually. Simpson-Bowles is the way forward, Anderson. And what did Simpson-Bowles do? They didn't raise tax rates. They eliminated deductions. All but two, I think, interest on your home with a cap and charitable deductions. And they had lower rates, a 25% corporate rate. The top individual rate was around 30%. They took that $1 trillion from eliminating deductions and exemptions. They put some of it on the debt, some of it to buy down rates, and they did entitlement reform. That's exactly what I think we'll wind up doing, and we'll come together on discretionary spending cuts. I'm very optimistic after hearing John Boehner today say that revenue would be on the table in the form of Simpson-Bowles. I think that's the magic way forward, and the Democrats have to do entitlement reform.
But if you look at the polls, I mean, that people actually voted for, a lot of them do support raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans. Boehner said he would not do that today. He wouldn't support it. Harry Reid still said Democrats would insist on those taxes being raised.
Well, all I would suggest is that every bipartisan group has looked at this. The Gang of Six, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. Simpson-Bowles rejected higher tax rates. They raised revenue by eliminating deductions and exemptions, taking that revenue back into the Treasury, applying it to the debt, and buying down rates to create economic growth. And some future economic growth can be dedicated to
But does that really get you where you need to be on deficit reduction? Just eliminating
absolutely,
loopholes.
it does. It does. Well, there's $1 trillion out there every year that we give away through the tax code. Take that $1 trillion back, apply some of it to the debt, some of it to lowering tax rates to create jobs, and future economic growth set some of that aside to get out of debt. Raising tax rates was rejected by Simpson-Bowles and the Gang of Six, and there'll be no Republican who will go down that road because it will hurt job creation. Tax policy and job creation go hand in hand.
But didn't this president got reelected very clearly saying that is what he wanted to do, to raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans. The Republican challenger said he did not want to do that, and he did not get elected. Doesn't that give President Obama and the Democrats some right to push for raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans?
Well, I think the House got reelected. Their mandate is to not raise tax rates. And go back to Simpson-Bowles. Simpson Bowles rejected the idea of higher tax rates. They eliminated deductions. The people who will give up most deductions are the wealthy among us. Pick a rate, 30%, and tell people you got to pay it. How many Americans in the upper income level actually pay 35%? The tax code is a social engineering document to reward friends and punish enemies. Flatten the tax rate, make people pay the rate you pick, have a 25% corporate rate to create jobs here in America. If you have bad tax policy, you're going to have bad job creation. Simpson Bowles, the Gang of Six is the way to go forward, and I'm confident that's what we will do.
Well, we'll watch it. Senator Graham, appreciate your time. Coming up next, our panel, Chief National Correspondent John King, Chief Political Correspondent Candy Crowley, moderated the second presidential debate, also political analyst David Gergen, and Gloria Borger. John, when you listen to Senator Graham, I mean, couple his words with those of two congressional leaders today, do you get a sense we're looking at anything other than gridlock? I mean, you can say Simpson Bowles all you want, but both the sides completely disagree on this tax raising thing on the upper income Americans.
You're going to hear a lot of Simpson Bowles. Everyone will say it's the roadmap, and then when you get to the specifics of it, that's when they walk away. That's what happened when it was first released, and that's what has happened every time it comes up since, Anderson. You do have amid, Speaker Boehner, as you were discussing earlier, planted a flag today. He also said, well, I want to be conciliatory. I want to listen. Leader Reid says, I'm not going to draw any lines in the sands. The burden here is going to be on the President of the United States, and even a bit more so than usual, because Speaker Boehner, whether the Democrats think this is fair or not, he feels burned by the last time they went down this path. He thought he had to deal with the President, and he thinks the President walked away from it. And so is this a game of chicken where, who blinks first? The President gives up higher taxes on the rich for long-term tax reform. Republicans give up something in the short term to get more in the long term. That's going to be the kabuki dance, if you will, and the stakes are pretty enormous.
Candy, can you see any position where the President gives up higher taxes on the wealthy? I mean, he did get reelected on this, and he has been very clear on this particular issue. I mean, this was a major thing he ran on.
Yes, and he said if he got a bill that did not include the end of tax hikes for the wealthy, he'd veto it. So but that was pre-election. This is post-election. But the pressure, I think, is on all of them. But let's remember the pressure for the president. One of the things that is difficult about a coalition that puts you in office is every part of the coalition wants to protect something. They think that they helped put this guy back in office. And so you already hear folks on the left saying, do not touch Social Security. Do not touch Medicare. There is no need to do that. So there's pressure on that side, and there's pressure on the side of him that said in his acceptance speech last night, and I'm going to work, and we're going to get this done. So I think the pressure on the president is probably even more so than that on Republicans.
Gloria, do you agree with that? I mean, congressional approval levels are, at an all-time low.
Yeah, like 17%, something like that. I think there's pressure on all of them because I think what you have is a divided country. And I think they've got this huge speed bump, which is the question of tax cuts for the rich. And they have to figure out a way to get around that. Maybe they'll raise the bar of how you define wealthy. I think everybody understands that there's an outline of a framework here to do tax reform. Mitt Romney talked about it in his campaign, said cap deductions. He gave them an idea. He said, let's do this. So I think they just have to figure out a way to get around this. My big question is, what role does Paul Ryan play in all of this? Because he's pretty far out there. He's now a national figure, said, no new taxes. And John Boehner's going to have to try and lead some compromises in his own caucus, and he's got now a new national leader.
So do you see compromises possible?
Because
of the fiscal cliff.
Okay, so here's the thing. In the olden days when I covered the Congress, I always used to say, you know what, they're going to end up doing the right thing. I no longer think that. I now believe that they could all retreat into their corners. The only thing that gives me hope is that it's in their own ultimate self-interest to get something done.
Yeah, it's in everybody's self-interest. David, as you survey the landscape of the incoming Congress, do you see any likelihood that these members will be able to come together, work with the president on big ideas, immigration reform, climate change, tax reform, entitlement reform?
I do, Anderson. I'm increasingly optimistic that we will not go over the fiscal cliff. The sharp drop in the markets today sent a clear signal to Congress and to the president that you guys better not let us do this, that you're going to throw us into a recession next year. And Barack Obama doesn't have to run for office again, but the rest of these folks up there do. And they may often be dumb, but they're not crazy. And I do think that they'll act out of some sense of what the national interest here. I think the way to get there, though, is to be careful not to isolate just the question of tax hikes on the wealthy. If you isolate that, you're going to get everybody dug in. What you need to do is put that question into a broader framework. How do we raise revenues, which John Boehner said today he was now open to and he would favor that, and how do we get spending down through entitlement reform? If the Republicans are willing to come to the table on some form of tax increases that don't come out of the middle class, and also the Democrats are willing to go along with entitlement reform, you could get the structure of a deal now. You can't get a real deal before January 1, but you could get an agreement on what the basic structure would be, and then direct your committees next year within 6 months or a year to come back and put the deal together.
But will they get there is the big question, I think, Anderson. Can they get there? Because just we talked about the Tea Party last time. They came out of an election. They said we won't do these things, and they wouldn't do those things. Some of these new Democrats, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator-elect Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, for example, ran ads saying, I will never cut Medicare. What happens?
Yeah.
And maybe the president will actually come up with a plan. He's been reelected. He doesn't have to run again.
Well, I'm curious also
maybe
to see,
he'll put something on the table.
Does he
We'll
change
see.
the way he interacts with Congress? I mean, does he sort of take some of the criticism that he's gotten in this race and sort of figure out a
and
different way?
invite him over to the White House,
yeah,
maybe
play
once
golf
in a
with
while.
him or
Play
something.
golf, have him at
Who
dinner.
knows?
I think it's a good
Candy,
idea.
David, Gloria, thanks. John, stick around. When we come back, I want to break down the demographics that are key to President Obama's victory and Republican trouble winning the female vote. And as Lindsey Graham said a moment ago, the Latino vote, huge difference there. We're also joined by a panel of Republicans to talk about how their party changes to fix the problems they face.
I believe we can seize this future together because we are not as divided as our politics suggests. We're not as cynical as the pundits believe. We are greater than the sum of our individual ambitions, and we remain more than a collection of red states and blue states. We are and forever will be the United States of America.
Another moment from President Obama's acceptance speech in Chicago in the early hours of the morning. The fact that it wasn't a concession speech, due in no small part because President Obama and the Democratic Party managed to assemble a voting coalition that better reflects America's growing diversity. They did that in part through a computerized data crunching operation that was so sophisticated, so closely guarded that campaign spokesman Ben LaBolt called it their nuclear codes. John King is back to break down the numbers for us. John, take a look.
Anderson, it was their nuclear code, perhaps, but they did what they said they were going to do. If you go back to your notes a year and a half ago, you asked the Obama people, what are you going to do? They said, we're going to identify our voters, we're going to find them, we're going to keep in touch with them, and we're going to turn them out. And nationally, if you look at the electorate, men 47%, shaded red because Governor Romney won, but women, there's a big gender gap, 53%. If you're winning as the president did 55% of the biggest chunk of the electorate and you're competitive elsewhere, you're on your way to winning the election. This is the women vote, if you look at it here. That's one piece. Let me slide it over. That's nationally. This plays out in swing states as well. You get to a state like Colorado, the president actually won the men's vote as well. But women made 51% of the electorate. Once a reliably Republican state in Colorado. Look at that. More of a classic swing state. It's closer here in Colorado, but the president won there by being competitive among women as well. And I'll move you over to one more. This is a little touchy. She's had a tough couple days. 48% in Ohio were men, 50% in Ohio were women. And once again, Anderson, you look at the gender gap. This is just the gender gap, and bang, especially college-educated women in the suburbs critical to the Obama coalition. But that's not the only piece. That's the only piece. Let's come back and look nationally by race. When we saw this number last night, we knew Governor Romney was in trouble. Only 72% of the electorate was white yesterday. Governor Romney needed that up at 74, even 75%. African Americans, 13% of the population. Again, a lot of people thought that would drop. High African American unemployment. Not history the second time around. The Obama campaign, that operation you talked about, found them, got in touch with them, and turned them out in Philadelphia, in Cleveland, elsewhere across the country. And look at this. The president got 93% of their votes. Again, 13% of the electorate, but you're getting 93% of the votes. And this is historic. Latinos crossed double digits, 10% nationally for the first time. And this is not only part of the president's victory coalition, this is a long-term generational crisis for the Republican Party. 7 in 10 votes among Latinos nationally for the president, 27% for Governor Romney. And again, Anderson, it's not just nationally. You look at states like Nevada, where the white vote is smaller. Why? Because the Latino vote is nearly 20% of the vote in the state of Nevada. The president gets 71%. Can't win. You can't win. The other side can't win when the numbers are like that. And let's bring this over Colorado. Much more of a white vote, 78%, but Latinos at 14%, excuse me. Let me pop out the pie chart one more time, and the president getting 75%. Let me shift walls, Anderson, to take one more minute of your time. I want to show you this. Nevada used to be a swing state in presidential politics. Colorado used to be a Republican state in presidential politics. New Mexico was a swing state in presidential politics. Florida, a swing state in presidential politics. If the Democrats keep getting 66, 70% of the Latino vote, watch this. The darker the area, the higher the Latino population. So in Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico, it's almost game over. In Florida, last night, we're still waiting to get the final results. Latino vote critical to the president's lead. And if you look at the state of Texas in the long term, if the Republicans don't solve this problem, 1 or 2 or 3 more presidential elections, we might be talking about Texas as a blue state, Anderson.
Wow. It's amazing looking at the maps like that, the demographics. John, appreciate that. So let's talk about this. Given that, how does the Republican Party evolve? That's the question. What is next for them? For some on the extreme right, there's not a lot of self-examination going on quite yet, certainly not today. Take a look at this from the American Spectator. Doomed beyond all hope of redemption, dark thoughts on the meaning of a catastrophic election. That's from the American Spectator. From a Tea Party group in Ohio to Cincinnati.com, under the headline, "We mourn the loss of our country," there's this quote, "Today I wear black, the day America died." From a conservative interviewed by the liberal Mother Jones, quote, "This is not hyperbole. This country is done. The writing's on the wall. Dead." And from the billionaire Romney surrogate, who shall go unnamed, quote, "This election is a total sham and a travesty. We are not a democracy." Joining us, a panel of Republicans, Red State Editor-in-Chief Eric Erickson, GOP strategist Kristen Soltis, and Alex Castellanos, and former George W. Bush Press Secretary Ari Fleischer. So, Alex, we talked last night about your party's challenge reaching Hispanic voters. Is there a sense the Republicans are ready to fundamentally change their approach? Is that what they need to do, or are they just looking for a better way to package the positions they've already got?
Well, I don't think this is a small thing. This is not a matter of changing your positions on a couple of issues. We need to remember that the philosophy that Republicans hold, which is freedom and opportunity for everybody, is what works, and it's the reason people come to this country and have for generations anyway. Nobody comes to this country, to the United States, hey, I'm going to get more government benefits here. Most people who come to this country come here because it's still a land of opportunity, a land of endless promise. And that's what I think the Republican message needs to be. We need to become the party of yes and the party of more. Come here. This is a place that has open arms for everybody. And Democrats, yeah, you get more from government. But there's an end to that. It's going broke. With Republicans, you get more from the economy, which is the real reason you come here.
Kristen, I mean, ahead of the vote, there were all of these predictions that young voters wouldn't turn out for the president the way they did 4 years ago. According to exit polls, your party hasn't made any headway in reaching them. Republicans had 4 years to address the problem. What are they still doing wrong on that?
So actually, young voters did break heavily for the president, but not as heavily as they broke 4 years ago. But Republicans still have a long way to go. And I think this election hopefully has sort of busted 2 myths about them. The first myth is that they're not going to show up. Turnout is now at 19%. It's never been below 17%. A lot of my colleagues got that wrong. They thought they'd stay home. It's clear that this is a new world. The other thing that's different is you saw the voters in their 30s actually were the group where Obama did better than he did 4 years ago. The young voters for Obama last time, they got older and they stuck with the president. I think it's important for Republicans to realize that this isn't just a matter of young voters who are going to grow up and become conservative when they get older. This is going to resonate throughout these voters' political lifetimes.
Yeah, Ari, part of the problem with young voters may be your party's positions on social issues. A lot of Democrats will certainly say that. Conservatives sound very nostalgic, obviously, about the Reagan era, but that was a time when there was a lot more diversity of opinion on social issues. I mean, now, you know, President Obama mentioned gay people every step on basically every campaign stop. I don't think I ever heard Mitt Romney acknowledge that there were gay and lesbian Americans in existence. And that's just one thing that in young people in the polls you look at, support for something like same-sex marriage runs much higher.
You know, Anderson, if you want people to vote for you, you have to be comfortable talking to people. And that means Republicans have got to start going into communities they typically don't go to and speak and listen. And that connection is just a part of how people say, I think he understands what I'm going through in life. But let me give you 2 other factors that are huge part of how America is changing, and they're cultural issues, Anderson. If you're married, you're voting Republican by 29 points, according to the exit polls. If you're single, you voted Democrat by 14 points. Think of the gap between single and married. And then also, huge issue, religion. America is increasingly becoming a secular country. 17% of the Americans told exit pollsters they never go to church or synagogue. 29-point Democrat advantage among those who never go. But among those who go to synagogue or church every week, plus 19 Republican. The cultural divides are turning the Republican Party, and this is the red state, blue state issue, into essentially an older party that's a more church-going party of married families and children. The Democrats are increasingly younger, more secular, and unmarried. And the numbers don't look good for Republicans.
Eric, where do you come down on this whole notion of, did the party go too far right? Should it be more of a sort of center-right? Or are you of the opinion that Romney was too center-right and not conservative enough?
I think the problem with Mitt Romney was it depended on the time of day and the week as to what position he was and where he was. And that was part of the problem. Look, when you have a guy who agrees, by the way, in the first debate, which everyone says he won, he actually agreed substantively with Barack Obama on 7 to 10 positions. 7 in the second debate, 5 in the third debate. When instead of drawing bright lines, you're trying to blurry them so you can do this passive-aggressive campaign where you say, I'm going to be a better manager, but I'm not really going to tell you where I stand. Well, people are going to go with the politician they know, not the politician they don't know. You've got to actually be able to articulate your vision for the country, which
But Eric,
really
are you saying that what the GOP had was a Mitt Romney problem, or do you think there is a GOP problem? And if there is, what do you think it is?
Oh, I think it's both. Part of the problems the Republicans have is that they've been very successful for 30 years, and they've forgotten that they can't just talk inside the echo chamber. They've got to go outside the echo chamber. They've got to be able to explain things to people. When you're talking to Hispanic voters, it's really hard to woo Hispanic voters when they think you hate them. It's not the policies that Republicans advocate that hurt Hispanics, but they get that vibe from Republicans. They've got to be able to.
So you think it's just the way the message is delivered as opposed to what the policies actually are?
Look, freedom and equality of opportunity sell to everyone. The Republicans have a great message to sell. They just got to remember that a lot of people can't come from countries where that's not the message.
And Anderson, there are some things, though, that Republicans need to fix. We're against big government unless all of a sudden big government agrees with us or we're running it, especially on social issues. Freedom nationally, values locally, get government out of our lives. I think, we saw a lot of excitement from Ron Paul come into the Republican Party. We saw a lot of youth there. That's the future of the party, I think. We can't cheat and cut across the track and hug big government when it agrees with us.
Right.
But the future of the party is also... The future of the party is through economic growth and economic ideas. Our number one problem remains debt, and that still is something that Republicans have got to lead the way in solving.
We got to leave there. Eric, Krista, and Alex, Ari, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let me know what you think about this, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Twitter, send me a message on Twitter at Anderson Cooper. Coming up tonight, what is next for Mitt Romney? A look at the former governor's political future, if he really has any. Is he just going to kind of go the way of like Mike Dukakis, kind of disappear from the national stage when we continue?
I so wish that I had been able to fulfill your hopes to lead the country in a different direction, but the nation chose another leader, and so Ann and I join with you to earnestly pray for him and for this great nation.
Mitt Romney, obviously, last night conceding the election. He spoke for less than 5 minutes, half as long as John McCain did in 2008. Governor Romney also said this. Listen.
I want to thank Paul Ryan for all that he has done for our campaign. And for our country. Besides my wife, Ann, Paul is the best choice I've ever made. And I trust that his intellect and his hard work and his commitment to principle will continue to contribute to the good of our nation.
The one thing Paul Ryan was not able to do is deliver Wisconsin, his home state, obviously a key battleground. Its voters helped push President Obama over the victory line, as they did 4 years ago. Congressman Ryan did win re-election to his House seat. Under his state's election law, he's able to run for an 8th term concurrently with his vice presidential bid. He's expected to return to Washington. Mitt Romney's next step, though, isn't nearly as clear. Candy Crowley and Gloria Borger join me once again. Candy, 2 failed presidential bids, a 1-term governorship of a state that resoundingly voted against him last night, and a Republican base that clearly was never too enthusiastic about him and is today kind of attacking him. Does Mitt Romney have a political future on the national stage?
I'm not sure Mitt Romney wants a political future on the national stage. I mean, this was not an easy fit. Mitt Romney with this particular iteration of the Republican Party. In general, the Republican Party, unless you have a base to return to, as Paul Ryan does, but if you're Bob Dole, who quit the Senate to run, you do tend to kind of disappear. People don't come back to those who lost elections for them and look for a lot of things. But if you're a John McCain, you can go back to the Senate. You can certainly turn that into something. And John McCain has become one of the most powerful voices of criticism against President Obama, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. John Kerry, the same thing. He had a Senate seat, but there's no place in politics, no elective office that Mitt Romney holds now. So I don't see where he easily fits back into this party at this point.
You could become a cable TV host. Who knows? One of those networks out there. But what do you think? Do you think he has? Because it seems like a lot in the Republican Party today, we're quickly moving.
He's over.
You're right.
History. It sounded like a valedictory to me last night, and. He didn't talk about our cause will live. We're going to continue to fight in the future. It was sort of like he was going to recede, and he'd done it twice. He tried. He lost. And there are a lot of people who regarded him as a transitional figure, even when he was the nominee of the party. So I think he'll probably go back to business, maybe to Bain Capital, who knows? But I don't see politics in his future.
Candy, what about Paul Ryan? I mean, he's long been considered one of the rising stars of the Republican Congress. Will he just pick up where he left off as kind of a increased superstar budget wonk, or do you see him try to broaden out, claim the mantle of party standard bearer?
Well, he's got time. Listen, he has something that is very hard for a House member to get, and that is nationwide recognition. He also is a bona fide brainiac when it comes to budget things. You may not agree with what he would like to do with the budget, but he understands the budget. So there's still a place for him there. He certainly does speak for the conservative wing in the fiscal part, but he's also very pragmatic. So, yeah, I mean, I think he can. There's been some talk, maybe he should go to a think tank and, hang out for a while and think those big thoughts. But, he's got, it's a nice spot. He clearly wanted to keep it if he wasn't going to get the vice presidency. So, I think he's young. He's 41 or 42. I think he's one of the contenders when you look 4 years from now, if that's the route he wants to go.
Yeah, Candy Crilly, appreciate Gloria Borger. Thanks very much. Joining me now is former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, thanks very much for being with us. Looking at last night's exit poll results, it's clear, or I guess I should ask you, do you think it's clear that your party has a big problem on its hands reaching out to Hispanic Americans, for instance? Its share of the Hispanic votes decreasing. And if so, what do you do about that?
Well, I certainly agree that we have a big problem reaching out for the Hispanic vote. What was it, 25%? Right. I ran for mayor of New York, and each time I ran, I got a higher percentage of the Hispanic vote, and they probably elected me with 43%. Then I got 48%. I think that President Bush had us up to about 48% nationally, and since then we've been declining. I think there's one big issue. I think Lindsey Graham would agree with this. I just talked to Lindsey about this a couple of days ago. We've got to get over this immigration reform hurdle. I mean, President Bush was on the right track with comprehensive immigration reform. If we had passed that, we would be a party that probably had a 45% Hispanic base.
So how do you sell that message to the fringe of your party? Because that's not a message they want to hear.
Big opportunity lost, really, in Mitt Romney losing, because I think that's one of the things Mitt Romney could have accomplished. With a Democratic Senate, Republican House, new president, he probably could have gotten 150 Republican votes for comprehensive immigration reforms, which means to the Hispanic community being sensible about the 12, 14, 15 million people that are here. You can't deport them all. You can't chase them all out. Sure, you can focus on the ones that are criminals or the ones that are doing bad things, but I know that community really well, and 90% of them are hardworking people who are actually making a contribution. So why the heck do we want to hound them? And I think that's the major thing that hurts us. And
what's also interesting about your record, I mean, you're someone who's held positions on social issues that certainly are not in step with the rest of your party as it is right now. According to exit polls, unmarried women went for the president by nearly 40 points. Do you think the Democrats, what they said was a war on women message resonated? Should your party adjusted its approach on women's issues, especially reproductive issues, or same-sex issues, same-sex marriage?
Well,
does there need to be evolution there?
I ran that way in 2008. I didn't get the nomination, and nobody with my views ran in 2012. And frankly, Anderson, I didn't run in 2012 because I didn't think I could be nominated being pro-choice and being pro-gay rights. I signed, as mayor of New York, I signed the first in the nation civil union bill. And that was
Didn't you officiate at a gay wedding, I think, once? No, I remember reading that. You had some friends who got married or something.
Didn't do that.
Okay.
Still believe marriage should be between a man and a woman, but I'm very open to civil unions, and I'm also open to allowing states to decide this on a state-by-state basis. So if New York wants gay marriage, fine. If some other state doesn't want to have gay marriage, here we are, a party that believes in states' rights. Until we get into an issue like gay marriage, and then we don't believe in states' rights.
And also this is a party that doesn't believe in heavy federal government involvement in people's private lives unless on certain issues. And again, it's something Alex Castellanos brought up earlier. So again, how do things evolve in that? Do they need to evolve for the GOP?
My ideal Republican Party would be a Republican Party that was fiscally conservative on foreign policy and military policy, and on social issues, we would be libertarian. We would say, we're going to stay out of your pocketbook and we're going to stay out of your bedroom. And I think that party could be a majority party. I think
there are people say, sorry, go ahead.
I think if we were running that way this time, I think we win by 4 or 5%.
What about the Tea Party? I mean, there are people who say the Tea Party decided it wanted pure candidates, and I put that in quotes. So your party lost some unlosable races that they may have cost Republicans control of the Senate. Some say Republicans can't win with the Tea Party, but they can't win without them. And a lot of leaders don't feel comfortable publicly, even bringing this issue up.
Well, I think what we really should try to do with the Tea Party is to get them to figure out what are your priority issues. Their priority issue, the whole reason it got established, was big government, heavy taxes, Obamacare, government trying to direct your life, and then allow a certain amount of flexibility on social issues. If we could organize around fiscal conservatism on foreign policy and on military policy, and then allow people to disagree with each other, sort of in the Ronald Reagan mold of, if you agree with me on 8 out of 10 issues, you're my friend. Somehow we're going to have to get around to that kind of party. Otherwise, and I've been saying this for 10 years, otherwise we give away, look at the map, we give away the entire Northeast, and we give away the entire West Coast. By the time we get to the electoral vote, we got to win by 1 state, 2 states. And, when you get a good campaign against you, as Barack Obama had a great ground game and a great campaign, then you'll lose.
I got to go, but I just want to ask you very briefly, do you think Mitt Romney has a role on the national stage in the Republican Party, or do you think he goes to kind of like Mike Dukakis, kind of disappears from the national stage?
We don't do that. Republicans don't reject their prior candidates. I mean, we've had lots of candidates.
I heard a lot of rejection today.
I know. The day after we reject them, and then a year later, they have a role in the party. Mitt Romney ran a very, very good race. The reality is he's a very, very intelligent man. He's got a lot of terrific ideas. He's someone that I think can play a big role in this party. Will he be a candidate again? I doubt that. There are an awful lot of candidates coming along. But will he be someone that we respect, admire? I ran against Mitt Romney, and I saw in 2012 a Mitt Romney that I really, really admired.
Okay. Mayor Giuliano, appreciate you being on. Thank you very much. I know you've had a long day. President Obama's victory comes to new challenges. History shows second terms, of course, can be tricky. We're going to look at the pitfalls and the possibilities. Stay tuned for that. Hey, welcome back. Barack Obama obviously won entry last night to the ranks of 2-term presidents. The day after President George W. Bush was reelected, CNN's John King asked him about the freedom that comes with winning a second term. Listen.
And also whether you feel more free to do any one thing in a second term that perhaps you were politically constrained from doing in a first.
You asked, do I feel free? Let me put it to you this way. I earned capital in the campaign, political capital, and now I intend to spend it. It is my style.
President Bush forged ahead with an ambitious domestic agenda, but his second term ended with a financial crash. President Clinton spent much of his second term mired in that sex scandal and fighting impeachment. And even if they managed to avoid major missteps and scandal, second-term presidents are lame ducks, which brings its own set of problems. Let's talk about that with Cornell Belcher, Democratic strategist and Obama 2012 pollster. Also, Van Jones, former special advisor to the Obama White House. Alex Castellanos is also back. Cornell, first of all, I would have expected you to take today off and at least maybe a couple of months
your
off.
Your producers kept calling me.
We tracked you down. Okay, I apologize about that. Alex, let me start with you. The biggest difference from a first term to a second term is the president doesn't have to worry about running again. I know you don't agree with President Obama's policies, but you heard President Bush in that clip from 2004. Re-election brings with a certain amount of political capital. Do you think it does with President Obama?
Yes, I think free at last. He doesn't have to answer to voters. He's got tremendous flexibility now. And, you know, it happens to politicians and it happens to athletes. Once they've won a big one, once they've won a major, a championship, the pressure is off and they can become better athletes. The same thing is true with politicians. Barack Obama has an opportunity now to kind of lift his eyes over the horizon and see how history is going to judge him, not how the next election is going to judge him. He has two things he has to deal with, debt and economic growth. He can focus on that like a laser, and the politics is going to get smaller, and the presidency now, I think, can get bigger.
Cornell, what do you see is different? What could change now?
I think that's well said. Look, this time the presidents, whoever they are, Democrat, Republican, they start thinking about legacy. So what are the big things that they can get accomplished where they, they don't have to worry about re-election? You know what Alex said. Clearly, the debt and economic growth there, but also, I got to think, and I have no information on this, but poverty is a big issue that on the left, his left base has been screaming about. And let's also understand that poverty is someplace where this president started. He started organizing for churches, in urban areas, people in poverty. So I also got to think, this is my dark horse issue here in the second term, is also a real look at poverty and what we do about poverty in this country.
Van, what do you see? What do you see changing? Do you think the president changed his style? How do you think things are different now?
Well, I mean, he will focus now on this question of the debt and deficit. He's been clear about that. He wants to do it with a balanced approach. I do think he wants to be the president that was able to solve some of the problems he sees with entitlements. There's going to be some thunder on the left. His liberal base is going to be very concerned that we don't have a 10-to-1 deal on revenues versus spending. But that's going to be there. But I really do think that Cornell touches on something very important. The African-American community has been very patient and very quiet as a lot of pain and suffering has begun to accumulate in the black community. This community has lost almost 60%, 70% of its wealth in the housing debacle, job crisis, kids in prison, urban poverty has not been discussed yet. This community still came out nonetheless, 93% for this president and won Ohio for him. I think there's an opportunity for him to now turn back to this base that's been there for him and find some pathway forward, some jobs for youth program, something like that could be a part of his legacy.
Hey, Cornell, just very briefly, I haven't asked you about last night. Was there ever a moment in the final couple of days where you thought the president was not going to win?
Here's the thing, Anderson. It happened exactly how I laid it out. I said it'd be tight in a lot of states, but in the end, from an electoral map standpoint, we were going to be solid. We were going to be solid in Ohio. We were going to be solid in Virginia, and I think in the end we're going to win Florida because we put in a ground operation there. We expanded the electorate there. We registered voters there. We ran really good programs there in those key battleground states. A lot changed from nationally, but if you look at the coalition in those battleground states, not a lot changed from how it looked in 2008.
Right. Cornell Belcher, Van Jones, Alex Castellanos, guys, thanks very much. The other big story we're following tonight, and is exactly what hundreds of thousands of people still suffering in the wake of Superstorm Sandy do not want to hear. Take a look at that. Staten Island, New York, blanketed in snow. Another storm slamming the East Coast. Rob Marciano's tracking the storm from one of the places hit by Sandy, the hardest, next. Well, tonight the Northeast is getting hit hard by another storm, a nor'easter that began pounding the region today. I want to show you some of the hardest hit areas. Heavy rain, snow, up to 60-mile-an-hour wind for the battered Jersey Shore, cities across New York and New Jersey. And Staten Island, hard hit by Sandy, 3,500 customers still without power. It is dark. They are cold. Look at that. Meteorologist Rob Marciano is live in Staten Island tonight. He joins me now. Rob, another storm. How bad is it?
Well, you can see the snow coming down. Obviously, it's cold enough for snow. The winds are blowing, as you mentioned. We are just a couple of hundred yards from the ocean, where this time during Sandy, the water was up and over my shoulder. So this area was decimated. The houses aren't completely destroyed, but certainly flood damage everywhere. And now it's covered with snow. We've got about 3 to 4 inches of it. The kids were out here earlier making light of it, at least trying to have a good time and making a snowman. But inside this home are the Camarettas. And they only have light because they're plugged into our satellite truck right now. I spoke with them earlier today, and for them, it's really all about a matter of survival.
I went through the most pain that I ever went through in my whole life, from being electrocuted, trying to get back into my house, to watching all my possessions and my family practically almost dying. You know, a few days without sleep. You can't sleep when you're living in a house with propane. You're worried about you're going to not wake up from carbon monoxide poisoning.
This has been a week from hell. I mean, you know, I'm grateful that I have my family. I could have lost 3 of them and my husband out there to the water coming up so fast.
You know, your heart just goes out to these people, Anderson. It's been over a week now, and they are just physically and emotionally beaten down. And now this, and with the winds whipping, those people that actually are lucky enough to have gotten the power back, they may lose it again tonight with this heavy, wet snow and the winds kicking up with this storm. Certainly unusual and not what they needed. Anderson?
Very quickly, how long is it going to last around that area?
Well, the snow probably going to last at least through midnight, maybe all the way till daybreak. So we could see several more inches. We got winter storm warnings up. Can you believe that? After a hurricane came through just over a week ago, and high wind warnings up as well. It's a dangerous situation and won't be done till at least daybreak tomorrow, Anderson.
Yeah, brutal. Rob, appreciate the reporting. Thanks. Get warm. We'll be right back.
You got it.
Good evening. You're looking live at the White House, where a happy and undoubtedly exhausted President Obama is celebrating his big election win. But with no time to waste, the president has already been working the phones, calling congressional leaders, including top Republicans, to talk about what he wants to accomplish before the end of the year. And it's a big agenda: the deficit, taxes and jobs, not to mention the looming fiscal cliff. So a tall order, but listen to an optimistic president. And why shouldn't he be? In his election speech last night.
We are not as divided as our politics suggests. We're not as cynical as the pundits believe.
I'll talk to David Axelrod about the president's plans. And on the other side of the aisle, how will the GOP handle the changing reality in Washington, and indeed by losing again? I'll ask the Republicans later. Meanwhile, breaking news tonight: a knockout punch from Mother Nature. The nor'easter bearing down on New York and New Jersey tonight, just 9 days after Superstorm Sandy. New York City's death toll has already risen today to 41 from Sandy, and the current storm has forced airlines to cancel more than 1,700 flights in the region. We're live in one of the hardest hit areas. But we begin with the president's storming election victory. Joining me now, the man who arguably did more than almost anybody else to help President Obama win a second term, is top strategist David Axelrod. David, you must be feeling pretty chuffed.
Oh, yeah. It was a great night, Piers. Just to be in that room at McCormick Place last night with that crowd and the sense of joy and idealism and patriotism, frankly, that was evident in that room. And then today the president came by the campaign headquarters and spoke to the young volunteers, not volunteers, but staff. And it was a very moving encounter. So this has been a tremendous 24 hours.
When was the moment last night, if you're honest, that you thought, we've got this, it's all going to plan?
You know, when the votes started getting counted, we knew pretty quickly. We have, you know, we have a fairly sophisticated model. We had projections. We knew when we were hitting our targets. And our folks are very skilled, and when they saw the votes the votes coming in Ohio and Virginia, first it was Virginia, and then in Florida, there was the sense that this could be an earlier evening than we thought.
We look at the demographics that have come out from all the polling last night. Pretty much across the board, you guys had a very good night on women, independence, you know, younger people. African Americans, Latinos, Asians. It was a pretty big, sweeping area of people coming in to vote again for you guys. Were you pleased about the level of the turnout?
Oh, absolutely, and the breadth of it. You know, the question that was being raised on the other side was whether the Obama coalition that served him so well in 2008 would come out again. And so one of the things we saw very early, and even before the polls closed, when you know, just looking at the turnout, was that we were getting strong turnout among the very groups you were talking about. And it was that was encouraging.
The inevitable inquest has started into why the Republicans lost. If you were putting your strategist hat on and looking at their campaign, where do you think they really, in the end, lost it?
Look, I think the problem for the Republican Party is that the center of gravity has shifted so far to the right that they're way out of the mainstream. The positions that Governor Romney took in the primary on immigration reform, the positions that he took on women's health issues and contraception and Planned Parenthood drove large numbers of voters away from them. And then on economics, which is central to this election, they had a theory that, frankly, was not a popular theory in the country, which is that, you know, if we go back to tax cuts for the wealthy and deregulation, that would profit everyone. And then for Romney himself, there were specific things that he did. I think that the decision in the final week to try and litigate the auto bailout again in Ohio had a tremendously negative impact there and perhaps beyond Ohio. So, you know, in the final analysis, there are a lot of factors here, but in the short term, that was a very bad decision in my view.
People are looking at what happened and saying, look, the Senate remains with the Democrats, the House remains with Republicans, you know, Barack Obama's been re-elected, not much change. How can we expect the Washington machine that many see as being fractured, if not paralyzed, to somehow regenerate itself now and get stuff done? Speaker Boehner's come out today and said, you know, come on, Mr. President, let's get some stuff going here. But how much of the responsibility lies with him, with Speaker Boehner, do you think?
Well, I think that he certainly bears some. People want cooperation on both sides. The issue at hand, of course, is going to be the fiscal cliff and our budgetary situation. President's put a proposal forward. It's incumbent on the Speaker to say what they'd be willing to do and not simply say it's not our responsibility. I think people expect everyone to live up to their responsibilities. And, you know, one thing that is clear as I moved around the country with the president is they're hungry for that kind of cooperation. I hope that coming out of this election, people will come with a renewed sense of cooperation, because it'll take that to solve problems. Let me just say one other thing, though. You mentioned that not much has changed. Actually, what's interesting is you had these super PACs spending literally billions of dollars to defeat the president and to defeat Democrats running for Congress. Well, the president was reelected. You have more Democrats in the Senate than you did before, more Democrats in the House than you did before. And one heartening thing to me in this election is that these special interests and billionaires spent all this money and got nowhere with it. And hopefully that'll discourage the kind of obscene spending that we saw in this election, because it plainly didn't work.
Obviously, you've got, as many people put on Twitter, I was watching it last night, the reaction, a second chance, many people see it, to perhaps be bolder, be braver than you were able perhaps to be in the first term. There are parallels. Two of the most popular modern presidents have been Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, both of whom had pretty rough first terms. Then they had very successful economies for their second term, and that emboldened them to be much braver, perhaps, than they might have been. Are you hoping you're going to get the kind of economic security, if not prosperity, in this term that will allow you to do perhaps the things Barack Obama, when he sailed in on hope and change, hoped he could do?
Well, Piers, I do believe the economy is improving, but I want to challenge a bit of your premise, because one of the reasons the economy is improving is because this president was brave. It was brave to intervene to save the American auto industry, which was not a popular decision at the time. It was brave to move forward on the Recovery Act, which was not popular at the time and still is the source of controversy, because without that, we would have slid into a second Great Depression. It was brave to stand up the American financial industry when it was on the brink of collapse, even though that was an unpopular thing to do, because he understood that we needed to do these things to move the economy forward. And now we're reaping the benefits of that bravery and those good decisions, because the economy is improving. And I do believe that gives us a chance to move forward on a series of fronts to further strengthen our economy for the short term and the long term, and strengthen the middle class. We're not losing 800,000 jobs a month anymore. We're gaining jobs, and that foundation that's been laid is a foundation on which we can build progress.
And two very quick last questions. One is, I understand that the first person the president called after knowing that he won was Bill Clinton. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Does he feel a big debt of gratitude to him?
Oh, there's no question about it. As he said to President Clinton, he was the most valuable player in this campaign. You know, we got a chance to spend some time with President Clinton over the weekend. He just campaigned his heart out, and he was because he believes that there were two choices here, and one led us forward and one led us back, and he was very effective out there. And so there is a strong sense of gratitude, and I think the president is looking forward to calling on President Clinton in the future for advice, counsel, and assistance as we move this country forward.
And secondly, the biggest tragedy of the whole evening for many of us was the fact that your moustache gets to stay on. Are you a relieved man this morning?
This has been the subject of a lot of discussion. I will say that when I made the bet was if we lost Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Minnesota, I would shave off my mustache. I did it with complete confidence that this mustache, which has been appended to my face for 40 years, was going nowhere. So I'm very, I was confident then. I was pleased that I was right. But you know, sometimes you just have to take a stand, and I did on that one.
Well, courage has always been your byword, Mr. Axelrod. Congratulations on a brilliant campaign. I know a lot of it's down to you, and the team. It was a masterclass in how to win an election. Well done.
Thank you so much.
David Axelrod, a very smart guy. Vice President Biden celebrating and at the same time blasting Republicans, saying the GOP has some soul searching to do. With me now is the Vice President's son, Beau Biden. Beau, you must be a happy guy tonight.
I am. I'm a very happy guy. But what happened last night? Wonderful night.
You were with all the top team, the president, the first family, and your parents. What was the mood like as victory became a reality?
Well, it was a very exciting night. It was, as David said, I think, you know, it was exceptionally exciting for all of us. We were in a different part of the hotel than the first family. I was getting out of the shower, quite frankly, and I saw that we won Iowa, which I was very interested in the fact that we won Iowa, and I spent a lot of time there. And then my 6-year-old son came and I told him that, and then he came back to me and said, "No, Daddy, we won." And because I went back to start getting dressed, and I said, "No, we won Iowa, honey." You know, he said, "We won." And that's how I found out from my 6-and-a-half-year-old son.
That's brilliant. And how's your father about it?
Oh, he was, you know, over the moon. He was very, very happy. Our entire family was. We were all together, and it was a great end to a great night and a great campaign.
The key, it seems, to most impartial observers about this second term now for President Obama is how he's going to get bipartisan support to really get stuff done and to fix America's big problems. What do you think he should be doing? Who should he be dealing with, talking to? Who are the names he should be sitting down with? What is the strategy here?
Well, and, you know, I'm going to leave this strategy, obviously, to David Axelrod and to the president, his staff, and his chief of staff, Jack Lew, and my father. But what I will say is that I think there's an opportunity here. When you have Tea Party favorites like Congressman Akin in Missouri being beaten so soundly by Senator McCaskill, when you have Mr. Murdoch in Indiana beaten so soundly, when you have Joe Walsh in the state of Illinois being so beaten soundly by a great veteran, Tammy Duckworth, I think the fever has a potential to break because the Tea Party's been repudiated now 2 cycles in a row. And I think you're going to see a number of Republicans, at least I hope, good Republicans that are going to have, I think, the courage to stand up to the Tea Party caucus because they know it's not in their interest and ultimately not in the nation's interest not to be able to come to principled compromises on so many important things, starting with the fiscal cliff, which needs to be dealt with over the next many weeks.
What's your father's plan now?
Well, his plan is to get to work. He'll be back in D.C. tomorrow. He's home here in Wilmington tonight. And they got a number of issues to tackle, not just the fiscal cliff, but immigration reform, energy policy, education, a whole host of issues that he's focused on that you heard him talking about during the course of this entire campaign.
I mean, he's been, I think, one of the unsung heroes. I thought his vice presidential debate was terrific. I think he's given the president a real kind of yin-yang double act thing, which has worked very effectively, particularly in the areas, perhaps in the Midwest, where you were so successful. He must be feeling pretty proud, isn't he?
Well, I think he is. I am. I mean, he played a critically important role in this campaign. I mean, the vice presidential debate came at a time where there was a bit of a slide. If you looked at some of the polls, and you know, he stopped that. And I was very proud of him in that debate. I was very proud of him what he did throughout the country over the last 6-8 months. He was in the battleground state of Ohio dozens of times, all over the battleground states, and spoke directly to the middle class about what this president has done and what this president will do to continue to build this economy from the middle out and the bottom up. And you know, I don't think there's a better spokesperson on behalf of the president and the party and what the administration wants to do over the next 4 years than my father. I was extremely proud of him.
Yeah, so you should be. He's done a terrific job. Sending my very best. And congratulations, Bo, to you, the family, everyone involved. It must be a thrilling time for you all. 4 more years. Well done.
Thank you, Piers.
Where is the economy headed in President Obama's second term, and where are the Republicans headed? Jack Welch is here, live to talk about the election, the economy, and why his mate Mitt Romney blew it. Welch was an outspoken supporter of Governor Romney during the campaign and had some harsh words for President Obama, the former CEO of GE. Joins me now to talk about the election, the fallout, and, well, what happened to your mate, Mitt Romney?
Well, he didn't get it done.
Why?
You know, he didn't get the minorities. He didn't get the young women. So we really had an issue with that population, and he didn't carry them. He didn't sell the story. Now, I think he's a wonderful man. I think he's a great guy. I think he would have been a great president. But it's over. And the president's got to be commended. What a campaign. You know, when he knocked off Hillary Clinton, that was an incredible accomplishment when he took her on. And he came in now with a tough record, and Axelrod was on a little earlier. He didn't have to shave his mustache. And
but actually hearing David Axelrod, I mean, I've interviewed him about a dozen times in the last 18 months. His voice tone never changes. He's always very calm, very strategic, and always been very confident. And to be fair, they all have been in the recent weeks, even as others have been saying you're in big trouble. You know, and I thought listening to him was very interesting. His analysis of where the Republicans have gone wrong here, pushing themselves so far out in the nominee race to the right that it was almost impossible for Romney really to come back.
Right of Rick Perry on the Latino issue. And it's a tough place to be. But look, they deserve all the credit in the world for a great job. I mean, Axelrod's a hero for this job. If you like management, you like what they did.
Yeah, very, very smart on-the-ground operation.
Everything. And, you know, it gets to what has to be done next. I mean, if you think about the country's problems, the fiscal cliff and the regulatory wall. No one talks about that, but it's equally important to knock it down if we're going to get the jobs back and the economy we need. And the president, if we can get out of him the same intensity that he has campaigning, and the same intensity day after day after day.
Well, actually, the same intensity of him campaigning in the last week, because we only really saw that. I mean, I watched Obama last night making his acceptance speech, That was the Obama I remember from 2008. But it wasn't the Obama we saw, for instance, in his convention speech. It wasn't the Obama we saw in the debates. For some reason, he was a little bit lackluster in this campaign. But when it really mattered, I thought he ripped it up.
He got up for it. And if we could get him up for it now, to go after the fiscal cliff and deal with the Republicans, and then go after his own staff, bring those cabinet members in, bang heads, how are we doing about jobs, putting every plan, every regulation, is this a job creator or a job killer? And be on them and managing them.
But look, the Republicans have got to be less intransigent too, haven't they? They've got to be less...
No question.
They have got to be. And they've got to be less driven, I would argue, from the result of this election, by the Tea Party, by the more right-wing members of the party. They've got to try and bring themselves a little bit more to the middle, haven't they?
And the president has got to lasso Harry Reid, who is day one, has come out prepared to change the filibuster rules and do all that. Boehner so far has been okay. Because his first day one, was quite conciliatory. Now we'll see if they... But the president, if we could get his leadership, the way he has it in the campaign, look, he motivates the campaign workers, he motivates the team, gives great speeches, he's all over it, he's excited.
I thought the moment when he went down to New Jersey with Chris Christie was actually a very significant one for what the next 4 years could be like. You know, there you have Chris Christie, Romney's great right-hand guy, putting his arm around the president and fighting together. I like that. And I know Christie's getting flack from the party. I think it's ridiculous that the guy was doing what he should do as the governor of New Jersey.
Christie did just the right thing. He had a job as governor of New Jersey, and he did it. And he endorsed Romney all the way. He gave Romney a lot of support. Look, the optics, everyone's looking for a scapegoat today. I mean, it's the campaign, it's the manager. Axelrod's the hero. Stevens is the bum. I mean, that's the way it works in this game. It's the same way in football.
Would it have made a difference? I mean, I always thought Paul Ryan was a big risk as a VP because it didn't cover any other base, any other demographic. Would he have been bolder and braver, perhaps more successful, had he gone for a Marco Rubio or Condoleezza Rice, somebody a bit different from Paul Ryan who looked like a younger version of Mitt Romney?
You know, that's the second guessing, and I don't know. They always say that
he didn't even deliver his own home state.
He's never run a statewide race. He's been a district guy, if you will. But look, in hindsight, Marco Rubio may have gotten, instead of getting 27% of the Latino vote, you might have got 35 or 40, but you still might not have made it. I mean, the facts are, we didn't make it. And we had as good a candidate as we could, certainly the best candidate in the field. We got a good guy, a good person, a smart guy.
Who would you most like to see in 16 of all the current candidates?
I'll tell you in about 48 hours.
But who's the kind of person?
Well, Marco Rubio's a very appealing guy. I think he's a centrist. I think he can deal with the changing demographics.
Jeb Bush?
Can a Bush do it again? I don't know if the country's ready for a third Bush.
Maybe up against a Clinton.
There we go. That's a hell of a race, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's great. What I want more than anything is to bring this thing together now. We got to fix these two issues. But I want you to ask people when they come in here about the regulatory wall.
Yeah.
Because if we don't get natural gas and if we don't get oil out there, we have a chance to make this the American century. If we're the low-cost energy producer in the world, if we really take advantage of this fracking technology and our resources, America can have its... I've said before, this is the internet of this century now. And it's a huge opportunity. We're only in the first inning.
Well, Jack, great to talk to you. Thanks
Always
for taking
nice
it on the
talking to
chin.
you.
Near a sacrificial lamb tonight from the Republicans. You volunteered yourself manfully. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
When we come back, the latest from the Storm Zone, plus rising Democratic star Cory Booker on the nor'easter battering his state tonight, and on the president's election triumph. Some breaking news tonight, exactly what New York and New Jersey did not need, another dangerous storm battering the region. It's 9 days after Hurricane Sandy. CNN's Rob Marciano is in Staten Island tonight, one of the areas hardest hit by both storms. Rob, looks pretty cold over there. Tell me what it's like.
Well, it's cold and it's snowing, but just think, Piers, a little over a week ago, when Sandy came through, the water from the Atlantic Ocean, which is a couple hundred yards that way, would have been up and over my shoulders. It inundated this whole entire area. The houses aren't gone, but damaged all around. And now they've got 3-4 inches of snowfall here. A lot of them are staying in their homes, but a lot of the homes have the debris that's been pulled out. Actually, hi guys. These guys just came up and delivered some hot soup. So the community is coming together because the folks inside this house are staying put. And one of the reasons, sadly, is that some of their stuff got looted right after the storm, and they don't have power. The only light you see is because they're plugged into our satellite trucks. So a cold, dangerous night ahead with a lot of wind. Briefly on weather, already seeing record snowfall totals. Take a look at some of these, over 8 inches in some parts of Connecticut. Even New York City seeing almost 3 inches of snow, and it's still coming down. Winter storm warnings are posted. Radar lit up with all sorts of snow. So it's just incredible to see this sort of snowfall a little over a week after basically a hurricane came roaring through this exact same area. Not what we need, and certainly the folks that maybe just got their power back on, maybe seeing it go down as this heavy, wet snow lays down on some of those weak branches and power lines.
Yeah, and hundreds of thousands still without power at all. It must be freezing. Rob, thank you very much indeed. Cory Booker, obviously this area is affected of you as well. Tell me about what it's like where you are, but also what is your view of the repeated storms we're seeing at the moment?
You know, it's Mother Nature's 1-2 punch, and you know, it's testing the resolve and the grit of my state and my city and obviously this region. As I was shooting in here to do this interview and go back and soon follow around plow trucks in a few minutes, I just continue to see the fact that we haven't recovered. I've got about 25,000 people without power. Now this is being dumped as a potential to knock out more power within my state.
I mean, 8 inches in Connecticut. This is a big snowfall.
It's significant, and fortunately the bigger snows are further north where there was less hurricane damage. But this is going to continue us pulling together, standing together, and fighting together, because this has just been a brutal 10-day stretch for this metropolitan region.
It certainly has, and we send all our best wishes to those in those difficult areas. It must be very hard for them. It's time to the election. Big night last night for President Obama. I think he won a very convincing victory. What are you most pleased about? When you woke up this morning, what were the things that went through your mind?
Well, a lot of it was just relief. I mean, there's a lot of gains that I specifically saw for people in my city. This whole Obamacare that's gotten so tortured. The reality is there are millions of Americans that have access to health care. Those that were being denied by big insurance companies for coverage are going to be able to keep their coverage. You know, plans that are investing. We need to cut. We need to be responsible. But there's also, we can't only cut our way out of this problem. We have to invest. So waking up and knowing I've got a president that's committed to Pell Grants and opening access to education, knowing that
Where's he got to go harder, Cory? Because before we were, you were in campaigning mode for him. He's got back in. He can't be re-elected. So this is it for him. You can push the envelope now as one of his friends and supporters. What do you want to see him really going harder at?
Well, look, at the end of the day, we know what our problems are, and this is going to be tough to bring people together. This fiscal cliff is going to test not the president, but really the national resolve of our leadership to come together and solve our fiscal problems. I think the president did some really responsible things by putting up solid plans, but now we got to push to get them through. And I think that's going to be the test. But I don't want to go off the air without saying I think other things are happening in America that should be very encouraging. You know, I think that this was a moment in our nation where we took another step forward on issues of inclusion, of equality, of restorative justice. If you look at what happened in America, number one, first time ever you see marriage equality passing in other states, people recognizing, hey, you and me, created by the same God, we are all Americans. We should have equal protection under the law. You saw restorative justice things, California getting rid of 3 strikes. And I view the pot legalization not as people saying, hey, we love marijuana, but enough is enough. We're locking up so many people. We've got to find another way. Not a way I necessarily agree with, but think about this. We're the land of the free, but we lock up more people, wasting calculable resources from our country in this prison industrial complex, and people are starting to think there's got to be another way to do things. So as I look at the whole country, at a lot of the ballot initiatives, I get very encouraged that this nation is becoming, this democracy of ours is becoming more robust, more inclusive, and more enlightened about how to create safer neighborhoods, how to lower taxpayer dollars.
See, that is all true, and I don't take issue with any of that.
Yeah.
What I do think is crucial, though, is this whole bipartisan thing.
Yes.
And I was saying to Jack Welch, I was very encouraged, like many people, by Chris Christie's relationship with the president at such a crucial time. Chris Christie could have just totally ignored the president and played politics, but he didn't. And that kind of leadership is what is desperately needed in Washington. People want to see the Republicans and the president and his top people coming together and getting stuff done. I think the American public will be very unforgiving, and rightly so, if we get to February and we've gone over another cliff.
Well, first of all, it's brutal. The debt ceiling debate last year alone caused more shaking in consumer confidence than the attacks on 9/11.
It was pathetic.
It was outrageous. And
I mean, really, outrageously pathetic.
I talked to Bob Iger at Disney, and he was saying to me that what happened then is what happened, and people less people visiting his parks during that period, less people making.
Of course.
Yeah, so it hurt the economy. So look, I'm proud to be in New Jersey, where our folks are far more centrist, and you don't have the kind of extremes. I'm really worried about a Congress that sees. This is Republicans, right? Losing people like Olympia Snowe, who are leaving, losing people like Dick Lugar, who are getting beat on their right, having guys like John McCain and Hatch have to run far to their right just to keep their offices. This is very perilous for our country. I'm looking for us to going back, where you had guys like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill reaching across the aisle, working together. Guys like Jack Kemp, who influenced a lot of my thinking on urban policy.
Clinton and Newt Gingrich in the second term worked very well together.
So I think we've got the right president for that, but we need the kind of leadership coming out of Congress that's going to rise up to that challenge and bring our nation together, because most of us in this country are not out on the margins. We're not the wingnuts, as some people call them. Most of us, however we identify, Republican or Democrat, we actually have so much more in common than we do apart, and that's where we hope that our government will now follow where the people are.
That is so true. Cory Booker, great to see you.
Good to see you as
and
always.
Best of luck on the ground, because I know it's tough over there. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Coming next, the fight for women's votes. How the Republican Party lost the battle. Two women on opposite sides of that question. Go head to head. Both sides courted women voters, but in the end it was President Obama who had the majority of their support. So what went wrong for Romney and the right? I want to bring in Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood, and Republican strategist Kellyanne Conway. Welcome back to you both.
Thanks. Thanks, Piers.
Kellyanne, let me talk to you. We've talked a few times in the last few months about this. In the end, women rejected Mitt Romney in quite large numbers. How much of that was down to the policies that he adopted, the tone that he adopted, the behaviour of people like Akin and Murdoch? What do you put the blame down to for the loss of support amongst women?
Well, the margin was pretty typical for a successfully elected incumbent. Actually, Piers, President Obama carried women by 13 points in 2008 and carried them by 11 points yesterday. So his margin among women was down 2 points. That's an unusual trend line for a successfully reelected president. Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, all successfully reelected, all increased their margins among the female vote by 7 to 8 points. Obama actually went the other way. And I just don't want to confuse causation with coincidence.
Hang on. He's still 11% ahead of Mitt Romney. So whichever way you try and spin the apple cart.
Oh, no, I don't want to spin anything. You know how I am on the women's vote and what Republicans
Romney
need to do
lost, and he was comfortably beaten amongst women and amongst mothers as well, and by a higher margin. So why is the question?
And he carried men. In fact, the real gender gap exists for this re-elected president among men as well, but nobody seems to want to talk about that.
Kellyanne, nobody wants to talk about Mitt Romney's triumphs at the election. He got hammered.
No. Piers, all I'm saying is it's a very typical fact of politics that women do tend to favor Democrats and men tend to favor Republicans. What happened yesterday was not atypical in that. Women favored a successfully reelected president by slim double digits, and Barack Obama carried unmarried women handily. Mitt Romney carried married women. Mitt Romney carried older women. Barack Obama carried younger women. Mitt Romney carried white women. Barack Obama carried non-white women. On the broader question of what the Republican Party has to do, three quick things. One is go to where the women are. You know, this idea that women are just going to sit by the TV all day or click on to these internet ads to the tune of $1 billion and decide that they like you and that you are like them is really foolish. It's insulting to women. And not play into, I think there was never a really good response about Obamacare, and there was never a really good response about Benghazi, and really a failure to communicate against this war on women.
Okay, let me bring in Cecile here, because you've had a good run there. Cecile, I mean, obviously Obama won pretty comfortably, both in the popular vote and the electoral college vote. So it was a fairly convincing victory. And there's no doubt, you know, that women were more attracted to him and what he stood for than they were Mitt Romney.
Big time. I mean, this was an incredible night for women, for women's health, for the president. Overall, you know, the gender gap was 18 points yesterday, overwhelmingly won among Latino women, among young women. And I think the other thing we saw, so I think it was rejection of Mitt Romney's policies and his promises to get rid of Planned Parenthood, his pledge to overturn Roe, wildly unpopular with women. But in addition to that, we saw the candidates, some candidates who should have really easily been elected. Richard Murdoch in Indiana, Todd Akin in Missouri, were defeated because of their extreme positions on women. I think women went to the polls and showed they would not vote for men who wanted to take away their rights and who didn't believe in women's health.
Yes, then why did Scott Brown lose in Massachusetts? He's Mr. Pro-choice. I mean, let's not confuse causation with coincidence.
Kellyanne.
And let's not be a commercial for our interest here tonight. I mean, let's be fair. Where in the CNN exit polls? Wait, where in the CNN exit polls was what you just described? Where was abortion? Was it the top issue? Was it number 2? Was it number 3? Was it number 4?
No, but hang on.
Kellyanne, excuse me.
Kellyanne, I admire your optimism, but let's face facts here. Todd Akin and Richard Murdoch.
What does that have to do with Mitt Romney?
They both lost because of their ridiculous outpourings about issues that women thought were utterly offensive. What Mitt Romney should have done the moment they came out and opened their mouths with this nonsense was cut them off at the head.
He did. He told Todd Akin to get out of the race that same day. He told Todd Akin to get out of the race.
Did he? Why did he
Mitt Romney told him to get out of the race. But why are we talking about two people who lost in the Senate? Again, I didn't hear President Romney. I didn't hear President Obama last night in Chicago thank Planned Parenthood for his victory, say, as soon as I get back to Washington, I'm going to make sure this war on women continues. He was a pretty humble president. He realizes that 57.7 million people last night voted against him. And that, yes, we all want to work together, but it is ridiculous to pretend yet again that women ran to the polls because of abortion.
Yes, look, I think it was so clear last night, and Kellyanne can keep speaking, but the point is, President Obama talked about Planned Parenthood throughout this entire election. The only thing that Mitt Romney did, obviously he took very extreme positions on overturning Roe, on getting rid of birth control access. And what was incredible to me is in the waning weeks of this election, when it was clear that Mitt Romney was going down to defeat and that women were not supporting him, he ran millions of dollars of ads trying to convince women that he really was not that extreme on women's health issues. It didn't work. Women didn't vote for him, and that's the reason, frankly, that President Obama was reelected last night.
Where was that in the exit polls?
Let's agree on one thing. I think we can all agree on this. 20 years ago, there were 7 women in the Senate, and thanks to last night, there are now 20. That is something to celebrate, isn't it? 1 in 5.
Very exciting. It's incredibly exciting, and I think we saw over and over again. I mean, Heidi Heitkamp, who just was victorious in North Dakota. I mean, that's frankly a state where Republicans should have easily won, but Heidi has a very strong position in support of women's health care access. She's a breast cancer survivor, and that was actually, she really appealed to women and men about the need for women's preventive care. Mitt Romney continued to be dismissive his entire campaign about issues, trying to say that any issues women were concerned about were small issues and irrelevant. I think women showed last night they weren't.
Where did he say that? Where in God's name did Mitt Romney say that any issues women cared about were small and irrelevant? Can I see that quote, please?
I was actually on with you, Kellyanne, on a panel where you said, you know, women didn't care about women's health issues. All they cared about was jobs.
No, I didn't say that, Cecile. Hold on. Back it up. Back it up. I never said women don't care about health issues. You want to pretend that the word abortion means women's health because you're scared of using the word abortion.
I'm not at all
scared. Stop saying women's health if you're not talking about breast cancer, obesity, nutrition, cardiovascular disease, the #1 killer of women. Stop pretending that abortion's women's health. Can we talk about the fact that Heidi Heitkamp probably has a very different view on energy from North Dakota than your president and her president, Barack Obama? He's not for hydraulic fracturing. He's not for what's led to the North
segued
Dakota,
into hydraulic fracturing, which wasn't quite the topic
as
of this
opposed to
segment.
quote abortion.
Here's
No,
what I
we
would
have
like
to leave
to
it
say.
there, ladies. We have to leave it there. I will bring you both back though, because there's a nice simmering tension between you. So thank you both for joining me.
Thanks. Thanks, Piers.
Going next, does President Obama's victory mean America is moving to the left? I'll ask my political all-star panel.
It doesn't matter who you are, or where you come from, or what you look like, or where you love. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, or Hispanic, or Asian, or Native American, or young or old, or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try.
Well, President Obama's victory usher in a new and much more liberal America. It's a question a lot of people are asking tonight. Here with the answers, New York Times columnist Frank Bruni and Kurt Anderson, host of Public Radio's Studio 360 and the author of True Believers. Welcome to you both. Good to be here. Let me start with you, Kurt. I mean, it seemed to me from what the President was saying there, you don't have to be, doesn't matter if you're black or white, Hispanic or Asian, Native American, young, old, rich, poor. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try. It's a great American dream. He was obviously trying to revive that. Is he capable of delivering the old American dream now in a second term?
No, he's not. And I think what the Democrats need to do and what the president needs to do is to actually have a way forward and to sort of talk turkey about the fact that it isn't going to be like it was anymore. I think where he succeeded, and are we a more liberal America? In the social cultural ways, unquestionably. That was, to me, the big point of last night, is that on gay marriage, these popular initiatives, not a judicial decision, not a legislative decision, but the people in Maine and Maryland and Washington State saying, yeah, we're fine with this, with gay marriage. You see on the marijuana legalization in Washington and Colorado, I think the culture wars last night were won by the liberals. And I think that's unquestionably so. The politics, the political economy issues, I think that's where we are still very much split 50-50 and haven't figured it out.
Frank, I mean, I think that there's no doubt that what you saw last night was a repudiation of the Tea Party faction of the Republicans, the more extreme members of the Tea Party. They're not all extremists by any means, but that more extreme right that was chased by all the Republican nominees earlier this year, I think that got rejected last night.
I think you're absolutely right. I heard you say earlier, are we moving to the left as a country? I don't know that we're moving that far to the left, but I think the Republican Party has been held hostage by its right. And what they learned yesterday to today, as they're making sense of all this, is that if they don't find a way to distance themselves from their rightward element, from the Tea Party, they're going to start losing a lot more elections. And they're going to have a hard time ever getting the presidency back.
Yeah, I think, Kurt, you just see a total disconnect, don't you, between what is going on in terms of marijuana being legalized, gay marriage being legalized, the first gay senator, and so on one level. On the other level, you've still got Republicans, you know, who want to try and reverse Roe versus Wade and all that kind of thing. And it sounds to me so sort of archaic. It's like, come on, you know, this is not the battleground that's ever going to get you to where the next election is going to be fought.
No, and it's really interesting to read, as I did today, what the Republicans are saying about what's our problem. Now, they understand that you can't go, as they did, from having a margin of 9% among Hispanics for Democrats 8 years ago and 44% yesterday. You can't go from having, in addition, though, 8% gender gap 8 years ago, 12% gender gap 4 years ago, 18% gender gap today. There's a real problem there, and they can't just say, oh, we got to stick to our guns, and he wasn't conservative enough. There's a real problem if they allow, as Frank said, this right-wing tail to wag their dog.
Was it a mistake, Frank, do you think, to go for Paul Ryan as the VP pick? Did he send the wrong message? You know, another white guy with pretty far-right, you know, social issue views, certainly. Was it, with hindsight, or was, you know, Monday morning quarterback, but was it a mistake? Should he have gone for a braver pick, a Marco Rubio, a Condoleezza Rice?
I don't know that Paul Ryan hurt him that much. because I think at the end of the day, people don't vote for the vice president. But there were a whole bunch of atmospherics here. I mean, Paul Ryan, very associated with an anti-abortion position, and then you have these other Senate candidates saying what they did. And it all kind of came together in a way that made the Republican Party look, as you said, archaic and very mean-spirited. It's interesting you mentioned Rubio and Condoleezza Rice. I wonder, coming out of this, whether the Republican Party is just going to try to find and recruit candidates who have a darker skin color or who punch certain holes, rather than realizing that there are certain policies and certain ways the party talks that alienate a lot of voters, no matter what the color of the skin of who they put on the ticket or, you know, what the gender of the person they put on the ticket is.
I just think you look at these poll results last night and you're thinking the idea that in 4 years' time they could fight another election with two white guys from reasonably well-off backgrounds, I just don't think that can fly. I think they've got to be more adventurous, the Republicans. But for now, Frank and Kurt, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
Thank you.
A brutal nor'easter. Stay with CNN for the latest. That's all for us. AC360 starts now.